As an ordinary knight in the context of the struggle between Nivjad and the Northern Realm, Heme did not hold a noble position, let alone powerful power. He has no right to participate in those noble struggles, let alone be related to those strange things. He looks like cannon fodder in a great war. But he will still walk a path towards greatness and glory, he will change the history of the Northern War, and he will become the supreme ruler of the North. This is a path of achievement for warlords, a path of upward climb. I have a complete novel of 1.5 million words at Chijien, so I can read it with confidence. Keywords of the novel. Warlords in the Demon Hunter world with no pop-ups, complete download of the TXT collection of Warlords in the Demon Hunter world, and reading of the latest chapters of Warlords in the Demon Hunter world. Chapter 1. Unlucky Egg. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Unlucky Egg. In the rose-colored sky, groups of crows, migratory birds, and eagles were constantly churning and circling, chirping with joy at seeing so much food, Crusader Knights. I tell you, we can definitely win this war. Look, all the kings have come, even the sorcerers have come. The whole north has united, and the black-clothed people will surely be defeated. Revenge Sintra. The burly soldier stood on the box and enthusiastically said, his coat was black, painted with golden red mountain patterns, the coat of arms of the Kingdom of Eden. His words elicited a response, as the soldiers shouted slogans such as, Revenge for Sintra, for the North, and, Drive away the black-clothed man. These warriors from all over Eden are so confident in victory, as if they have already won. Young people are the most excited, and for them, war is like a great adventure. Everyone thinks they are the hero in the poem, not the corpse swallowed by crows after the war. But poets will not remember these things, they will only constantly sing praises and praises. Perhaps the poems after the victory began to ponder before the war, let alone the remnants of the previous war. However, this war is still different from previous wars that left thousands of corpses for several villages. The North has not seen such a union for many years, and the rapid destruction of Sintra shocked everyone. Throughout history, Sintra has been a powerful country at the mouth of the Yaruga River, controlling the Manada staircase in the north and south. Under the leadership of Queen Calendar, its national strength has reached a peak. But this was just a floating cloud in front of Nefertad. The Black Army suddenly appeared and quickly destroyed the country, and then they carried out an extremely brutal massacre in the city of Sintra. Decades ago, Neptune was still a distant term in people's mouths, and only knowledgeable people knew about this distant country. However, as the Golden Sun continued to expand, more and more people knew about it. But the Northerners still did not expect that the Nivjadians would quickly cross the Amir Mountains and begin invading the northern territories. And as the Neptune Empire destroyed Sintra and continued northward, forcing the northern countries to unite against the expansion of the empire, scenes of stirring morale can be seen everywhere in the camps of the northern coalition forces. The kings need to mobilize their morale to make the soldiers more courageous in fighting against the black-clad army coming from the other side of the Manada staircase. However, the emotional agitation only lasted for a while, and the crowd gradually dispersed. The trivial matters of the military camp returned to the soldiers' minds at this moment, and they discussed these matters in groups of 3 or 5. Some of the Eden veterans were complaining about their superior, a wealthy knight named Heme. This young man is going to the battlefield for the first time, and following such a commander makes the veterans very uneasy. Moreover, he has a very soft personality and dares not support his brothers. Recently, he has gone crazy and locked himself in a tent without coming out. But their complaints only lasted for a while before being diverted by other things that seemed more attractive to them. For example, those camp prostitutes with thin clothes and loose hair, as well as boxing from fist to flesh, and gambling that is never uncommon in military camps. As for Heme, who had just been complained about by the soldiers below, he was now lying in his knight's tent, melancholy on the marching bed, muttering. The First Northern War, the blood of the ancients, the Squirrel Party. Sigh, 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 but I can't continue like this. Let's start according to the plan. Heme, or rather, the traveler Heme, feels very bad about the current situation. He never expected to inexplicably enter the world of the demon hunters, and it was during the First Northern War. When he crossed over, the young knight happened to have died of a hereditary disease in his family at the age of 21. Then he took over the body and fused the last remaining memory of the night before his death. Then he locked himself up in the tent for several days, and after accepting the fact of his travels, Heme sorted out the situation he was facing. As someone who has read the original work of the monster hunter, this time traveler should now say that Hermione is very aware of how dangerous the time she is currently in. This is a bloody northern war, a contemptuous era where human life is like a blade of grass. How can he get through such a dangerous era? And the secrets he knew didn't have much effect on helping himself. With his current identity as a wealthy knight, knowing these things was a sin in itself. That is a struggle involving the highest level group of people on this continent. Why are you a wealthy knight meddling in it? So if you want to intervene in the plot, forget about it. Think honestly about how to survive in the present, just like the bloody Battle of Mount Sodden. The Battle of Mount Sodden was a crucial battle in the First Northern War, during which the expansion of the Nivjad Empire was halted. This is an extremely bloody battle, and the entire Sodden Mountain will be shrouded in magic. Even the powerful sorcerer has died 13 people. How he, as a young knight, can survive such a big battle is a question. Heme jumped up from the bed and walked back and forth in distress. He didn't have much left, a strong physique and decent military prowess. He held the position of a centurion officer. But this thing is just a bigger cannon fodder. In a cruel war, people like him will only die in groups like garbage. Running away is impossible. At least one is a wealthy knight, and if they run away, they will be deprived of their property. They cannot become commoners, and then they will transform from a larger cannon fodder into a chopping board for others to slaughter. Knight Heme, may I ask if you are there? There are some things that need to be handled by you here. While Hermione was still struggling to survive the bloody battle on Mount Sodden, a voice that was not unfamiliar to him rang out, belonging to his Sergeant Jerry. In the military system of the Kingdom of Eden, nobles and knights without leadership experience are assigned a sergeant, who will teach various military affairs to their superiors. Due to the intimate relationships brought about by their positions, many sergeants soared to fame and became aristocrats. This Sergeant Jerry clearly thought of it this way. As a veteran in his 30s, he was usually tall, strong, and quiet, making him a standard soldier at first glance. But that doesn't mean he doesn't aspire to promotion. For example, this time assisting Heme was seen by him as an opportunity to climb higher, but it turned out that this knight was just too muddy to help the wall. Although Heme did not have the arrogance of a nobleman, he did not even have the courage to help his brothers withstand pressure, which led to the military judge directly arresting their camp. Now, the military discipline in the camp is also forced to be strict. Now this person is hiding inside the tent and doesn't come out. He doesn't care about anything and really doesn't know what he's doing. Thinking and thinking, Jerry wanted to turn around and leave. He thought that even if he reported the situation, that guy wouldn't stand up for them. But driven by responsibility, he still decided to speak up about the matter and brush off his own responsibility. "I'm here, Sergeant. What can I do for you?" The voice of the complained person rang out, and then a strong figure walked out of the tent. The knight was wearing a coat painted with a gray flying falcon, which was his family emblem. Hermione has short black hair, and his face is not particularly impressive, which is something that cannot be found in a crowd. But with neatly groomed hair and a strong body, it still stands out among the crowd. For some reason, Jerry felt that Hermione's temperament was a bit different, but he couldn't say it. And it was precisely the hesitation brought about by this doubt that made Herm urge him to come for what exactly. "Sergeant, what exactly happened?" "Yes, Knight Heme, our people are in conflict with the Cordwin people. They insist on calling our Upper Eden Lumark and claiming it is their country's territory. Isn't this nonsense?" So the brothers started arguing, but I noticed there were quite a few people across the street, so I wanted to invite you to come. Ah, the territorial dispute is indeed due to this kind of thing. Hermione thought to himself that he was still aware of the territorial dispute between Eden and Cordwin, and as a result, the relationship between the two countries had been constantly dirty. This also indicates that the Southern Empire, with its blood and fire, brought deterrence to the north, and even countries with such intense conflicts temporarily let go of their affairs. However, this was not the focus of his concern, and Herme quickly realized that it was an opportunity to reverse his bad reputation among the soldiers. So, Jerry, do you know what those Cordwin people come from? Although we have decided to seize this opportunity, we still need to ask about the details of the situation on the other side. If someone rashly offends someone important because of this, it would be too much of a loss. Ah. No, don't worry, they're just scattered soldiers and wanderers. There can't be any nobles behind them. As a veteran, it is instinctive to understand the situation on the other side before hiring an officer, otherwise how could one possibly get into a position? However, Jerry's tone was full of surprises. Does this knight seem to be planning to stand out for them? Has the sun come out from the west? Then take me over, Sergeant. Hermione waved her hand very decisively, gesturing for Jerry to take him over. The place where the conflict occurred happened to be at a subtle point, which was by the small stream outside the Northern Alliance camp, which was the water source for the Northern Alliance. Therefore, soldiers from various countries gather here, and as contact increases, some things that are not mentioned under everyone's tacit agreement are also brought up by some people. Heme could see many people crowded by the creek from afar, with intense arguments and occasional foul language coming from within. The atmosphere was clearly tense. Jerry took the initiative to clear the crowd for Hermione and let him go to the center of the argument. Then Hermione saw both sides of the argument, the Ardian people wearing black and gold Red Mountain pattern jackets and the Cordwin people wearing black unicorn badges running on the yellow plain, accusing each other. Red ears on both sides, as if we are going to fight in the next moment. The difference between the people of Eden and the people of Cordwin is still very obvious. The people of Eden generally dress appropriately and neatly. And the Cordwin people have thick hair and whiskers, just like dwarves, and their actions are rough and unrestrained. This is directly related to the environment of the two countries. Eden is rich and beautiful, with grain fields everywhere, developed animal husbandry and handicrafts, and the wool produced keeps the whole north warm. Although Cordwin has a vast territory, its living environment is harsh and not suitable for human life. Throughout Cordwin's history, monarchs have wanted to go south. This is also why Cordwin has always wanted to seize the Upper Eden region of Eden, leading to long-term conflicts. Stop your arguments, I am the knight Heme, and I command you to stop arguing. The knight walked straight between the two waves and ordered them to stop. The people of Yadian were taken aback for a moment. They didn't expect that the soft-headed chief to come out. The Cordwin people, on the other hand, were intimidated by this aristocratic identity. Here were some ordinary soldiers, and they would still instinctively bow down in the face of the nobility. However, a knightly status was not enough to make the Cordwin people retreat directly, and they quickly regained their previous aggressive demeanor. So Hermione knew that he still had to use some lip service, and he had already figured out his words on the way. Are you planning to undermine the unity of the coalition forces? Herm's first words clearly stunned the Cordwin people. They never expected that the knight's first words would be like this, thinking that he would directly protect those Edenians. Of course not, Lord Knight. The Unicorn Dynasty soldiers, led by him, said in a somewhat bewildered tone, clearly confused by the big hat and completely lacking the previous dominance. Why do you still mention the dispute between Eden and Cordwin, causing trouble here? Neither the king of Hesed nor the king of Demavius wants to see such a scene. Or, are you intentionally doing so? I can completely infer that you are spies of the black-clothed people sent to disrupt northern unity. We. Spy. Knight, are you too? The Codwin people were clearly caught off guard by the big hat they had put on, and the onlookers were also moved by these words, causing whispers that were not conducive to the Codwin people to begin. Heme did not give the Codwin people any chance and continued to follow closely. Then I will report this matter to King Henset. I am a knight, and even foreign monarchs cannot ignore my report. Let's see what the king will do with you, those who undermine the unity of the Northern Alliance. This sentence completely panicked the people of Cordwin. King Henset was never a benevolent monarch, causing trouble for the king at this critical moment. They were afraid that not all of them would have to be hanged next. The Khmer knight is a wealthy knight, he is a nobleman with territory, and the king will not ignore his opinions. Jerry emphasized in a timely manner, frightening these Cordwin people together and increasing the reliability of his words with Mary. This sentence further intensified the panic of the Cordwin people, who knew that this knight could do it. Although he is just a low-level nobleman from a foreign country, he is also a nobleman. He is still in the military camp. If such a nobleman accuses these big-headed soldiers of anything, the king or his close aides will definitely see it. The vast majority of nobles are not interested in these matters, and the trivial matters of these lower-level soldiers have nothing to do with them. They are all handled by the lower-level soldiers through their own collusion. Even if some people look over their heads, these nobles don't have the energy to write stinky and lengthy reports to accuse anyone, at most scolding them is enough. This is also a step for the party being scolded. After all, there is nothing more suitable as an excuse for concession than the intervention of nobles. But this time they met someone who planned to use this matter to rebuild their authority, so they were unlucky. This is the benefit brought by Heme's aristocratic status. If he were just a commoner, it would be useless for him to talk about these things. No one would bother to talk to him. But he is a nobleman, although a low-level nobleman, as a member of the privileged system, his opinions will be dealt with. The fear of death extinguished the emotions stirred up by the Codwin people, and they didn't expect to encounter such an unconventional player this time, who came up with such a big hat. I'm very sorry, Knight Heme. It's all our fault. I'm so sorry, please don't do that. The leaders quickly pleaded with Heme not to escalate the situation, and they kept apologizing to the people of Eden, completely unable to see the previous arrogance. In the past, disputes between these lower-level soldiers ended with brawls, and then their superiors colluded with each other on how to report to the higher-ups, so as not to escalate the situation. Who would have thought that this time there was someone who directly pushed things towards the sky, which naturally scared these soldiers. Heme just waved his hand and urged these people to leave quickly. He didn't want to talk nonsense with these people here. And the Cordwin people did indeed hurry to leave, they didn't want a quarrel to lead them to the gallows. As the dispute came to an end, the crowd also dispersed. After all, there was no argument or even brawl. What was the point of staying there? Many people think it's boring, really. Why not give it a beating? It's better to give it a beating. Heme looked at the soldiers of Eden with a slightly proud gaze, and they were obviously a bit shocked. How did that weak knight from the past become like this? At the same time, in their hearts, their original disdain for this officer has turned into some respect and recognition, and everyone likes the officer who protects the calf. Everyone didn't deliberately confront their superiors, and it turned out that Heme's actions were purely his own fault. However, Heme knew that it would take time for these people to fully comply. But this is always a good start, at least let everyone know that he is a leader who can stand out for everyone. And in a place that Heme hadn't noticed, a tall man with a warrior-like demeanor nodded and then left. If he could see this person's face, his memory would tell him that this person was a white knight from the Kingdom of Eden. Selchuk has been feeling a headache lately, constantly searching for volunteers in the camp, and now he feels like he has found a very good young man. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Armed Crossing of Rivers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Armed Crossing of Rivers. Heme's behavior earned him unanimous praise from the soldiers, and many people were very happy that this officer had finally arrived. Everyone didn't deliberately resist the commander, it was just because he didn't do anything that they showed that attitude. Most people don't choose to confront their immediate superiors because it seems too foolish no matter how it looks, only the dumbest fools would do so. Taking his subordinates back to the campsite, Heme sat in her own tent again. He felt relieved and finally had a good start, but it was just a start. What he left behind from his predecessor is really a mess. If he were to focus more on his opponent's 100-man team, he wouldn't be like this now. It's really troublesome. However, these thoughts were quickly diluted by something even more deadly, that is, the current situation still remains unchanged. The Northern Alliance should not be long before crossing the Yaruga River to Sodden Mountain, and they still have to participate in that bloody battle. What should we do exactly? Heme pondered deeply, but in the end, she sighed silently. He was just a wealthy knight, and his resources were still too limited. In the end, he could only step onto the battlefield. It seems that I can only hope to survive in that bloody battle. I don't know if I can get a better position at that time. Just as Hermione continued to feel melancholy, Jerry's voice rang out outside the tent once again. Compared to last time, his tone is no longer so indifferent, but more respectful. Khmer Knight, White Knight Selchuk requests you to meet him. The sudden news surprised Heme and she quickly stood up. The White Knight of the Kingdom of Eden wants to see him. In his impression, he had no connection with this knight. Why did he suddenly want to see him? Selchuk is the most famous warrior in the army of Eden and one of the best warriors in the north. He can be said to hold a high position of power in the army of Eden. Such a person summoned him to go, but how could he not go? So he quickly moved and went to the White Knight's tent. And Selchuk's tent gave Heme a simple impression at first glance. A marching bed covered in bear skin, a marching chair, a table, and finally weapons and armor. Weapons and armor have flashes on them, and their owners clearly take care of them frequently, putting a lot of effort into it. These things filled Selchuk's tent, completely opposite to the magnificent tents of the high-ranking nobles in Heme's impression. This obviously belongs to the tent of a warrior, and it is also a warrior of a seasoned warrior. And the famous White Knight was sitting on a chair, flipping through the documents on the table. His woolen sweater was draped with a cover from the Kingdom of Eden, which could not conceal his strength. Heme could imagine what it would be like to wield weapons with her arms, as she didn't want to be attacked by him. Selchuk's face was full of righteousness, and his white beard made him more refined, reminding Hermione of the paladins in the fantasy works of his past life. In her heart, she exclaimed that he was no wonder known as the White Knight of the Kingdom of Eden. Heme Botdan, a wealthy knight from Essenland, had a father who was famous in the Essenland region but passed away young. He enlisted in the royal army in September 1263. These pieces of information are all correct, right? Selchuk's voice was very calm, perfectly fitting his appearance, and what he saw and read was exactly Hermione's resume. Yes, Lord Selchuk. Heme bowed slightly. He didn't understand what Selchuk had planned to do when he called him, so let's lower our posture first. Very good, knight. I have a mission here right now, and I'm not sure if you're willing to accept it. Selchuk put down his resume and looked into Hermione's eyes. For some reason, Hermione instinctively wanted to dodge the scrutinizing gaze, feeling like he couldn't hide anything under it. There are still some soldiers scattered in the upper Sodden region of the Kingdom of Sodden, and I need someone to cross the river to organize them and cause trouble for the black-clothed people. In a few days, the army will cross the river, and we need to do our best to cause trouble for the black-clothed people. Ah. Well, sir, but why is it me? Hemerton hesitated for a moment, instinctively wanting to refuse, but then realized that this was exactly what he wanted. After crossing the river, it's not up to you to decide what to do. Although the danger of crossing the river first is also great, at least fate is in one's own hands, rather than being driven to death on Mount Sodden. It's better than it is now. But he didn't show these emotions. It's foolish to show what he wants recklessly, he wouldn't do it. And Heme is also very strange, why would Selçuk choose him? I saw you refuting those Cordwin people. You are a clever young man, smarter than most of the people in this army, so I have a good opinion of you. However, I have to be honest with you that the danger in this industry is great. The northern countries have also sent some troops south before, but many of them eventually retreated in embarrassment. Are you willing to accept this task? I can promise that as long as you are willing to cross the river to engage in activities in enemy-occupied areas, whether you succeed or not, His Majesty the King will provide a generous reward. There are still some reasons why Selçuk didn't say it, which is that before Heme, he had already met some officers and knights who he thought were suitable, but most of them refused the mission because it was still so dangerous. And Selçuk will not force his troops to do these dangerous tasks. He prefers to do it himself, but the current situation does not allow him to do so, so this matter has been dragging on until now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have summoned a clever person at the campsite to ask if he was willing to do this. I am willing, Lord Selçuk. Hermione's dilemma lasted only a few seconds, and then he agreed to the order from the White Knight. He knew that this was exactly what he wanted. However, my troops' equipment is still too poor, and it takes money and food to gather the defeated soldiers. Do you think so? Heme's words were not finished, but the meaning was already very clear. He could take risks, but he had to give him some money, food, and equipment. Everything is not a problem. I will give you a set of equipment for the 100 team. Don't worry, Knight Heme. When you come back, I will report your achievements to His Majesty the King. Selçuk agreed very readily. While speaking, he took out a note and wrote something on it, then stamped it with his own coat of arms. Go find the military supply officer and ask for it, but don't take too much. Thank you very much, Lord Selçuk. When he withdrew from the tent, Heme felt a strong excitement, which made him feel like he had taken his fate into his own hands. Although they received the note from the White Knight, there was still a battle of wits and courage between the two sides when arguing with the military supplies officer. The guy with a single eye tried to fool him with inferior equipment and food, which angered Heme at the time. This guy must be planning to resell those good things that have been replaced, and that's how many of the good goods from the military merchants came about. Heme's reputation as a soft persimmon in the Yadian army was truly renowned, so the supply officer targeted him. If it were the previous Heme, he might have been deceived, and even if he knew, he would only swallow his anger, but now it's different. The knight directly exposed the small tricks of the military supply officer, uncovering things that everyone had a tacit understanding of and then threatening to report the situation to the White Knight. This move successfully subdued the military supplies officer, and in order to compensate Heme, he also handed over a batch of privately kept crossbows and crossbow arrows, allowing Heme to carefully collect this bastard who had sold countless items from the military arsenal. And when Heme commanded the servants to push these things forward and pile them up in the center of the camp, his subordinates were all shocked by this scene. How could their soft-footed shrimp chief bring them so many good things? Sir, is this? Are we going? Jerry was the first to react. As a veteran, he was well aware that these equipment could not be obtained solely through activities, but must have obtained consent from above. Will it be easy for them to get something from above? So there must be work to do next, and the risk is not small. Well, Hermione smiled, we're going on a big adventure. Heme then told everyone about crossing the river, and the order to cross the river was different from Heme's expectations, and the soldiers did not resist much. Heme forgot that he was not leading the conscripts of Eden, but rather the standing army of Eden, soldiers who had served on the border under the king's orders for a long time. It is only natural for them to follow orders, and they can only complain a few words at most. With the preparation time set aside by Heme, these soldiers skillfully bid farewell to their military mistresses. Actually some familiar prostitutes. And then wrote suicide letters, handing them over to the accompanying pastors, instructing them to handle the aftermath. The soldiers did this without any emotion, because it was already a common thing for them, and they had to do it every time before going to the battlefield. Being alive after the war is naturally a joke, but if one dies, it is very important as it relates to the distribution of wealth behind them. After distributing the equipment brought by Heme, on that night, Heme left the Northern Coalition camp with 100 or so people under his command without disturbing anyone. Due to Selçuk's command, the journey was smooth and unobstructed, and soon they arrived at the bank of the Yoruga River. Selçuk was waiting there with a team of soldiers, and the small boat was already prepared, with about 10 of them. On some small boats, traces of knives and axes can be seen, so it is self-evident what the former drivers of these small boats have experienced. The river under the dark night is very calm, and we can only barely see something under the moonlight, which is the perfect time for covert action. "Knight, you can still regret it now," Selçuk said, giving him one last chance to back out. And Heme just shook his head. That was exactly what he wanted. How could he not go, not participate in the Battle of Mount Sodden? "Are you going to get fireballs and lightning?" "Okay, take this map. This is the movement of the black-clothed man detected by the troops crossing the river earlier. I suggest you hide in the visible forest after crossing the river. The dense forest is enough to cover up your movements, but be careful, there seems to be some strange things in that forest." "Strange thing?" Heme frowned. He was very concerned about it. He knew there were monsters in this world. Some reports of the collapse suggest that the forest has devoured their comrades, and the Nivjad people will not enter the forest too deep. Walking through the forest is indeed safer, but there are also risks involved. "Okay, I'll pay attention." Hermione's face changed, and he thought of some bad things. "But I can't back down here, I can only hope that I don't have such bad luck." Just as the two were talking, the soldiers had already boarded the ship one after another, and now their officers were missing. After bidding farewell to Selçuk, Heme quickly jumped onto his small boat, and the river crossing operation immediately began. Selçuk watched as the small boat calmly paddled on the lake, and the soldiers tried their best to be as light as possible, silently blessing them in their hearts, hoping that their trip would go smoothly. On the side of Heme, they crossed the Yoruga River very smoothly. The Nivjad people did not deploy many troops on the riverbank. After expelling the infiltrating forces from the north, the black-clothed people instinctively believed that the northerners would definitely defend on the riverbank. They had no idea that the northerners' plan was to cross the river voluntarily. But there are still some traces of battle visible on the riverbank, such as broken arrows, broken shields, and blood on the ground. The small boat came to a steady stop on the riverbank, and according to the pre-arranged arrangement, Heme and the soldiers dragged the boat onto the shore and then hid it in the forest. They immediately entered the forest and used it to conceal themselves. Heme did not urge the soldiers to continue advancing. In fact, after entering the forest for a distance, he ordered everyone to rest until dawn. "Anyway, I came here from the beginning with the idea of evading the mountain climbing battle, so there's no need to rush with tasks or anything like that. Instead of rushing back and forth in the forest, it's better to take a good rest for a while and then continue moving forward during the day tomorrow." This naturally received unanimous cheers from the subordinates. Everyone knows well how dangerous the forest is at night. Previously, they were afraid that this night's newborn calf was not afraid of tigers and would lead people to collide in the dark forest, which would definitely result in many non-combat casualties. Everyone either leaned against the tree or lay on the ground, and thus began to rest. The forest in the darkness kept emitting the whimpering sounds of various animals, but this did not deter these veterans who had long developed the habit of falling asleep in any environment. Hermione was feeling a bit uneasy. He knew what kind of monsters were in the wilderness of this world, but soon these anxieties were replaced by more important things. And he thought, there wouldn't be any monsters in so many places where humans gather. Next, the knight began to study the map given to him by Selçuk, calculating the next route. After knowing where to go, he unconsciously fell asleep against a big tree. The next day, Hermione was awakened by the dew dripping on his face. As soon as he opened his eyes, he found that the soldiers had already gotten up to eat the dry food they carried with them, while Jerry was organizing the soldiers who had already finished to tidy up. "How did everyone sleep yesterday?" Heme first took a sip of water and then dug out a piece of jerky from the bag. This is not the kind of tough jerky, but one he brought from his territory. It doesn't need to be softened with water and can be eaten directly. "I definitely can't compare it to the camp, but it doesn't have much impact, it's just some minor issues," Jerry quickly replied. Heme glanced at the soldiers, most of whom were already prepared, wearing the equipment he had obtained from the military arsenal. Each person carried a backpack and stored dry food inside, enough to keep them active in the forest for a period of time. Everyone's morale is very good, and there is no fear due to the previous investigation. Those anxieties are also covered up by their laughter and conversation. "Then let's go and see where those sodden people are." Heme waved her hand and immediately walked ahead, with the others immediately following behind. The team presents a forward combat formation to facilitate the response to attacks from anywhere. At first, Hermione was extremely vigilant, afraid that a monster would suddenly emerge. But along the way, apart from some frightened little beasts, they didn't notice anything. Gradually, his vigilance also decreased. Traveling in the forest is very boring, and Herm quickly felt bored because there were only trees in front of her. And the soldiers are obviously in better condition. Their long-term military career has given them a different perspective on some things, not fighting but just walking. This kind of great thing is really great. Heme's mentality has also changed under their infection. Yes, wasn't he taking on this task to avoid the Battle of Sodden Mountain? Isn't it a good thing to walk here bored? Why complain? With this thought, his mood suddenly improved, and even his feet felt lighter. If it weren't for the need for concealment, he would even want to sing. However, his good mood was completely destroyed when he discovered something, which was a stone standing on the hollow ground of the forest. The stone was illuminated by the sun and looked very conspicuous. When they first saw this thing, everyone was still stunned because no one had thought how such a thing would appear. This stone has obviously been here for a long time. The upper part has been exposed to sunlight for a long time, making it look very clean, while the lower part has been entangled by vines and has grown a lot of moss. On top of that stone, there is a totem composed of strange lines, which have a clever beauty and are obviously not something that rural villagers can make. After looking at the totem for a while, Heme suddenly realized what it was. In his knowledge of the world of demon hunters, this totem generally only represents one thing. Damn it, why is there a deer head spirit totem in this place? They can only consider this place as the outskirts of the forest now. Dealing with advanced monsters like deer head spirit is too much trouble. Although Heme remembers how to deal with this thing in his mind, does he seem to have time to set up and deal with this monster now? But no matter what's going on, now Heme is facing the problem of how to deal with it. He is well aware that if not handled properly, then his trouble will be huge, still very big. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Deer Head Demon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Deer Head Demon. At some unknown time, the residents living on this land discovered the presence of some powerful creature in the forest. It can drive animals and manipulate forests, causing fear among residents. At first, residents kept a distance from it, but over time, they also began to worship it. The interaction between the residents and this creature is relatively harmonious. They offer sacrifices, while it restrains the beasts from attacking the village. Both the village and the monster gained benefits, allowing the village to ignore the threat of wild beasts, while the monster was satisfied with the villagers' offerings. However, sometimes it can also do things that confuse residents, such as slaughtering livestock. Residents cannot understand its thoughts and can only serve it more cautiously. Ultimately, what it is thinking is difficult for humans to understand, but it does not affect how people interact with it. But everything was shattered with the arrival of the Black Army. The slave owners of Nivjad captured most of the people in the village and enslaved them. The village was also burned, and survivors escaped the Yaruga River. This totem was thus forgotten. But it won't disappear just because it's forgotten, lose its offerings, and become even more manic. Heme certainly didn't know about these, but now, looking at that totem, he felt incredibly tricky. Just looking at this thing, he knew there was a big problem going on. The soldiers looked at the totem in awe and dared not get too close. They just looked at the totem from a distance, discussing in groups of 3 or 5 what they had encountered. The flustered faces showed how flustered and uneasy they were inside. Don't think so much, maybe it's just that you're mistaken. Deer-head spirit is not so common. Heme comforted herself in this way, and indeed, deer-headed sperm is an uncommon thing. This powerful celestial convergence product cannot be seen everywhere, it may just be an ordinary totem. However, the faint light emanating from the totem dispelled his illusion. Without a doubt, this thing has magic, so it must be the deer-head spirit totem. Damn it, it's really unlucky to encounter this thing. Night Heme, let's hurry and leave. Jerry said, let this thing stay here, it has nothing to do with us. The words of the sergeant were filled with fear. In his and the soldiers' eyes, it was better to be far away from such things. In rural stories, people who get close to these things never have a good ending. This is the simple life wisdom summarized by the people. For these strange things, if you can stay away from them, those who play with fire often die tragically. If it really cannot be separated, then we must wholeheartedly worship and gamble on what kind of mentality the existence behind us holds. After all, we only hope for one life. Hermione was pondering what she should do with this thing. Destroying this thing is not possible. Not to mention the retaliation of the deer-head spirit, the team under his command must start a fight first. Due to the actions of his predecessor, his control over his subordinates was not strong, and obedience to orders was only due to his identity, rather than genuine submission from the heart. But what if we don't destroy this thing, then what if the deer-head spirit keeps chasing them? Serchik mentioned that this thing would also attack northerners. They will always be active in the forest and cannot leave. Leaving the forest and exposing themselves to the Black Army is like seeking death. Totem is the key to resurrecting the deer-head spirit. If you don't destroy the totem, this thing can be resurrected continuously. Of course, this deer-head spirit may also be a different gameplay, which is to mark a person within its territory and rely on consuming that person's vitality to achieve resurrection. Just as Hermione was pondering how to solve this troublesome problem, he suddenly noticed that Jerry was listening to a soldier report something. The soldier was their scout, and Jerry's face changed several times as he listened. Then he looked at Hermione, who was casting a questioning gaze. A team of black-clad people are coming over, and they will be here in at most 10 minutes. This can be a double blessing, but that's also good. Let's all hide at first and see how many people there are in the Nivjad tribe. Upon hearing this news, Heme felt relieved for a moment. The man in black came just in time, and he didn't have to make difficult choices here. After the order was issued, Hermes' subordinates reacted very quickly and smoothly hid in the hiding place under the command of the soldiers. Hiding is not unfamiliar to them, and the battles on the border are all ambushes and raids. Jerry also led someone to roughly clean up the activity traces, and in no time, this clearing in the forest looked like it had never been inhabited before. Heme drew the long sword and placed it beside her, ready to pick it up at any time. He was surrounded by soldiers hiding themselves in bushes, and everyone squatted to hide their figures. A few crossbowmen strung their weapons and were ready to shoot at any time, waiting for orders. As time passed, the voices of the Nivjadians came, along with the sound of armor colliding, making Herm uncontrollably nervous. Quickly, the Nivjad people appeared before their eyes, led by officers wearing winged helmets and black armor engraved with golden suns. Behind them were a large number of low-level soldiers, wearing iron helmets. Some helmets had horn-shaped decorations, while others had flying wings. The equipment system of the Empire was obviously more uniform than that of the Northern Army, and the sun coat of arms could be seen everywhere. The black-clothed man clearly had a clear goal and walked straight to the totem, busy around it, while some people started a fire on the ground. These were all well-trained soldiers, and Heme noticed that they only had simple communication and immediately began to complete their respective tasks. Do you think so? The man in black is planning to overthrow this totem. Jerry whispered beside Heme. The voice of the Nivjad stirring up was loud enough for him to dare to speak. Heme nodded, didn't speak, and continued to look at the Nivjadians, most importantly, knowing what the Southerners were planning to do. They were busy tying ropes to stones, while the other Neptune soldiers looked around the forest with a wary expression, as if there were enemies hidden there. Well, they're planning to destroy this totem. It's really fierce. It's really reckless enough for Southerners, but it's also good. Let the Nivjad people suffer. Heme muttered inwardly, feeling that they were just messing around. But on second thought, he realized that these people had found the totem, which meant they weren't behaving as recklessly as they seemed. There must be someone knowledgeable guiding them. And just as the black-clothed man tied the rope on the stone and was about to start pulling the totem, they pulled out a prisoner with the jewel emblem of the Kingdom of Sodden on his body. His hoodie hadn't been washed for a long time, and it was all dirty. That person was also quite embarrassed, with an unnatural slimness on his body. The black-armored soldier forced him to kneel down, and the person was pressed down like a walking corpse. Then the Nivjad people chopped off his head, and blood spurted wildly, quickly forming a pool of blood. This made it completely incomprehensible for the people led by Heme to understand what was going on. Heme thought for a while and suddenly realized something. Is it an possessed person? He thought of this as another way for the deer-head spirit to resurrect, which is to mark a person within its territory and revive them by absorbing their vitality. He was both a totem enthusiast and an possession enthusiast, and he was even more certain that these Nivjades had someone to guide them and were well prepared. Just as Heme analyzed the reasons for the actions of the Nivjadians, the black-clothed man began to pull the stone fiercely. With their cries and pulling, the stone collapsed with a loud bang. Subconsciously, Heme placed his hand on the sword and felt a chill. Everyone present felt the same way, whether it was the man in black or the lurking northerners. Damn it, it's really here. This feeling told Hermione that the thing he was thinking about was coming, and it had indeed appeared. At some point, a tall figure appeared in the forest. That figure is 4 meters or even 5 meters tall, with its body and limbs made up of dead wood and branches. The hanging ornament composed of animal skulls sways on top, making a crisp sound. Its head was the skull of a stag, and for some reason, its pitch-black eyes seemed to be burning with flames of anger. Suddenly, the sky was filled with crows, who let out incessant cries, making the atmosphere particularly terrifying. Then they landed on the tree and looked at the people in black. They smell death. Jerry muttered with a hint of fear, while Hermione instinctively nodded slightly. Yes, these crows were still waiting for the banquet to begin. Wolf packs also appeared next to the deer-headed spirit, like courtiers guarding the monarch. For northerners, it is fortunate that monsters did not appear in their hiding places, and they did not have to serve as cannon fodder for the black-clothed man. Heme felt that the deer-headed spirit must have discovered them, but now the Nivjad people are its main target, so it did not attack the northerners. The Nivjad people exclaimed in surprise when they saw the appearance of the deer-headed spirit, and many instinctively retreated. This is a normal reaction for many people when facing monsters. Under the scolding action of the officers and a group of apparently fearless individuals, the soldiers quickly organized a fight against the king of the forest. The soldiers holding long halberds and spears immediately stood at the front line, the archers lit the arrows with pre-lit flames, and many soldiers holding knives and axes raised torches. It seems that the Nivjad people had planned to fight against the deer head from the beginning. Heme watched all of this with interest, which happened to make him watch the play. The monster and the man in black were fighting. It was like a dog biting a dog. The deer-headed spirit is obviously smarter than ordinary monsters. It lifted its hands made up of dead branches and suddenly transformed into a flock of crows, disappearing. Then it appeared among the Nivjad archers. The Nivjad people seemed to have encountered this move before. The archers were all wearing heavy armor and instinctively drew their swords, but it was of no use facing monsters. The seemingly thin withered arm had a terrifying power, but with a gentle wave, several people were knocked out with an incredulous expression on their faces. The move of the deer-head spirit immediately made the black-clothed man panic, and the simultaneous impact of the wolf pack and the tearing of the crow exacerbated the chaos. The battlefield instantly turned into a melee, where humans fought monsters with swords and flames, but were at a disadvantage. They were supposed to use a tight front to deal with these monsters, but now they are forced to engage in such chaotic battles. The deer-headed spirit swept through the crowd like a city-bumping car, and no one could stop him. Suddenly, someone was torn apart by a huge vine that appeared suddenly, and fear spread with the bloody scene. However, humans are not completely without resistance. The deer-head spirit was ignited several times in the melee, and the Nivjad people still bravely counterattacked and besieged the huge monster. Although the flames were quickly extinguished, the burning marks on the monster's body undoubtedly indicate that it was not very easy. As for the wolf pack and crow, they were ultimately too powerless to face the fully armed Nivjad soldiers. It is difficult for wolf teeth to bite through the steel neck guard, while the crow's pecking and biting can only have a harassing effect. It is still too difficult to dig out the eyes of the black-clothed man. So the Nivjad people quickly recovered from their initial panic and orderly besieged the monsters. They obviously had a plan to fight against the deer-headed spirit, constantly throwing ropes onto this monster and then starting to pull desperately to limit its movement. And the others fiercely greeted this guy with torches and rockets, with swords constantly slashing at the monster's wooden body. The body of the deer-head spirit is becoming increasingly damaged, and the wolf pack and crows it drove away are also scattering after leaving behind a pile of corpses. Its demise is only a matter of time. During this period, the deer-head spirit once again used the technique of transforming into a crow group, but this move clearly could not cross too long a distance. The black-clothed man immediately besieged them again, and they were clearly determined to solve this monster here. Finally, as the deer-head spirit's entire body was engulfed by flames, the Southerners cheered wearily. And Hermione understood that it was time for them to perform. And how could the Nivjad people not have thought that a northern army had been waiting for them for a long time, and now they were planning to move on? Some Nivjad people cheered weakly, while others sat exhausted on the ground, throwing their weapons aside as if littering. They suffered significant losses in this battle. At least 13 comrades were killed by that guy, and several others were unaware of their life or death, but they successfully killed the monster. Just as they were planning to rest and tidy up the battlefield, they suddenly heard such a shout. Black-clothed men die. Long live the North. Then it was discovered that a group of Northerners rushed out from the opposite direction of the deer-head spirit, holding swords, spears, and halberds, with golden and red badges on their bodies, representing the armies of the northern countries. Under the slogans of the officers, the Nivjad people quickly organized a new front, which demonstrated the well-trained imperial army, but unfortunately, it had no meaning in changing the situation of the war. Heme rushed to the front, setting an example for the soldiers. He immediately pierced the eye socket of a Nivjad man, who had not yet realized what had happened. The battle is like Herme's assault, there's nothing to say about it. After experiencing a bloody battle with that monster, the Nivjad people were in a very bad state, and the advantage of the Edenians was not average. Quickly, the Nivjad people escaped. Their previous battle with the deer-headed monster had exhausted their strength, and they encountered this sudden battle, so they were defeated shortly after. In comparison, the losses of the people of Eden were only 3 people, all of whom were accidentally killed out of carelessness. They did not pursue the Nivjades because Herme had ordered in advance, and more importantly, they collected usable items from these deceased and then left as soon as possible. The Ardean people obtained several prisoners, including the commanding officer. This guy remained steadfast on the front line even after all his subordinates were defeated, so he was overpowered by the people of Eden. The officer's wing helmet is now missing, and his beautiful black armor is covered in scratches. Despite being so embarrassed, he still maintains the arrogance of an imperial. Heme wanted to inquire about some information from him, but this person refused to talk to the barbaric northerners. Seeing that he couldn't get anything, Heme ordered his execution directly. Carrying prisoners behind enemy lines is just adding trouble to oneself, and Heme doesn't want to spend too much time on stubborn guys, so he just killed them directly. After the example of this officer, it was obvious that the others had to cooperate more. The Nivjad soldiers poured things out like beans in unskilled common language. During this period, there was a guy who wanted to deliberately stutter the common language to delay time, but his performance was too poor. Heme directly ordered this guy to be dragged down and solved, and then the others remained honest. It turns out that this deer-headed spirit has caused trouble for the black-clothed army for a long time. It seems to be influenced by the emotions of those who worship it. The deer-headed spirit not only attacks the black-clothed people who enter the forest, but also leaves the forest. It caused trouble for the Nepalese people outside their camp, and many Nepalese scouts were crushed into pieces of flesh by thorns outside the camp. Due to the presence of the deer-headed spirit, the Nivjad people were afraid to enter the forest, which undoubtedly provided a safe corridor for the northerners, who were much less likely to be attacked than the black-clad people. In fact, the Nivjad people have already killed the deer-head spirit several times. After all, it is still easy for the army to kill monsters, but the cost is higher. It's just that this guy keeps coming back to life, continuing to harass the empire, and then under the guidance of the sorcerer, they understand how to solve the problem. Firstly, the local slaves captured were informed of the location of the totem, and then the sorcerer used the remains left by the deer-headed spirit to measure and determine the location of the possessed soldier, the unlucky sodden soldier. These sodden people have been hiding in the forest and have not been attacked by deer-headed spirits precisely because of their possession. And the warlocks of Nivjad also took advantage of this and found their whereabouts. Finally, it was this battle, and the empire was indeed able to eliminate the deer-head spirit, but they never expected a northern army led by the Yellow Sparrow. After listening to all of this, Heme walked up to the deer-headed spirit that had turned into ashes, and looked at the burnt black deer-headed spirit skull. I really didn't expect there to be so much more behind this matter. However, at least I don't have to go find any sodden people anymore. I already know they're finished. How should we handle it? Jerry walked up to Hermione at some point, and his expression showed that he had come up with a hard face. Because other soldiers stood far away, afraid of getting involved with the monster on the ground that had turned into ashes. Heme didn't speak, just made a cutting gesture, and the prisoner must not be left behind. Jerry quickly went to execute the command, which was not an unfamiliar task for him. Executing the command was better than standing in front of this pile of dangerous things. As the problem was resolved, Heme's team once again embarked on the path forward. They walked towards the depths of the forest, and now that there were no monsters left, they could naturally go there. Moreover, Heme knew that there were few other monsters in the territory of the deer-head spirit, so there was no need to worry about encountering attacks or anything else. Everyone's movements were very rapid, because it was unknown when the Empire would appear. And in this forest clearing, only a pile of stripped corpses and the charred deer skull remain. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Captures. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Captures. As expected by Heme, after removing the deer-headed spirit, there were no monsters in the forest. After arriving deep in the forest, far enough from the intense battlefield of the battle, Heme ordered the entire army to rest, just in time to calculate what they had gained in the just battle. Apart from some scattered coins and food, the biggest gain of this battle was mainly the acquisition of a pile of Nefrid uniforms, armor, and other armor from the Adrians, so they didn't take much. These covers and badges were specifically ordered by Heme to be taken away, as with just a slight disguise, dozens of mercenaries loyal to the Nivjad Empire would have emerged. Heme knew that the empire had conquered the entire southern region in these decades, and the so-called Nivjad people actually only referred to some people living near the city of Jinta, so it was normal for this army to have a team of mercenaries speaking different languages. Although Heme doesn't know when this thing will be useful, it's always right to carry it with you. What if it can be used? And as for what to do next, Heme plans to move south in the forest and strive to reach the end of Mount Sodden, the farther away the better. In a few more days, perhaps today, the Northern Alliance will have to cross the river, and the Battle of Sodden Mountain will begin. At that time, the Nivjad people will be defeated. In that scene of collapse, they had too many opportunities. For example, if we directly plunder the Nivjad camp and scrape off the tent of General Black, we won't make a huge profit. As Heme pondered the next action, his soldiers marveled at the pleasure of the previous battle. Beating the black-clothed man in such a way was truly satisfying. The Northern Alliance and the Imperial Army also had several encounters, and the common belief among Northerners is that this army is not simple, it can be said to be a strong enemy. In their words, there was also a lot of respect for Heme. Victory was the most prestigious thing. In the mouths of the soldiers, Heme seemed to have won their hearts, and now they no longer doubt the ability of this young commander. There is nothing to say about the days ahead. The people of Eden will march through the forest during the day and sleep as soon as it gets dark. The Nivjades were unable to catch up with their footsteps, or they had already given up. Anyway, the people of Eden did not see any signs of Nivjades appearing. With sufficient rest and the nourishment of confidence brought by victory, the morale of the troops is getting higher and higher, and the morale of the soldiers is also getting stronger. And calculating the days, Heme also led his subordinates closer to the edge of the forest. They need to be on standby at the edge of the battlefield as soon as possible, so that they can take action according to the situation. This trip is for this. Just as the people of Eden were marching in the forest, they heard the sound of explosions coming from afar. The scout immediately climbed up the tallest tree next to him, looking in the direction of the explosion, and the answer he gave was exactly what Heme had in mind. War is going on. Upon hearing the start of the war, Heme immediately urged his subordinates to hurry and go to the edge of the forest as soon as possible to investigate the situation there. Everyone's movements were also quick, without any hesitation towards Heme's orders. Quickly, the group arrived at the edge of the forest. After the scout confirmed the safety ahead, Hermione and Jerry walked to the edge of the forest. It is unwise to run to the edge of the forest with so many people, as having too many people means it is easy to be discovered, so a few people are enough. The location where they came out was very good. Not far away was the Nivjad camp, where you could see teams of Nivjad soldiers heading to the front line under the flag of the Golden Sun. The expressions of the people of Nivjad are all very bad. Of course, seeing what happened on Mount Sodden, no one's mood will be good. The scenery on Mount Sodden is magnificent, with fireballs and lightning constantly dancing on the battlefield, suppressing the army of Nivjad. Soldiers are constantly being bombed, and although there are also sorcerers in the south, their quality and quantity cannot be compared to those in the north, resulting in the Neptune army being completely suppressed. The fireballs and lightning of the Northern Alliance ravaged the Nivjad position like bombing, and even though the Imperial Mage had done his best to provide protection, it could not change the situation where the Black Army suffered heavy casualties. But the Nivjad army remained steadfast in their advance. Even though they suffered heavy casualties, they bravely charged towards Mount Sodden and fought fiercely against the defending Northerners. The flag with the golden sun and the coat of arms of the northern countries kept shaking and intertwined, like a lover entangled in bed, but the way these lovers communicated was through swords. And the southern warlocks were not completely lacking in counterattack ability. Heme saw fireballs from the southern army hitting the warlocks' position, igniting several people. The magic of both sides inevitably explodes in the battlefield of melee, equally blowing up or turning the soldiers of both sides into coke. This scene made several Ardean people here instinctively swallow their saliva, and now they are extremely grateful that they were sent out to carry out the mission, rather than standing on that magical battlefield. As this scene was something she had already foreseen, Heme only watched for a while before focusing her attention on the Nivjad camp. What's important now is what we should do, wait here until the battle is over. That feeling was a bit negative, and now the Nivjad people have no idea that there is such a northern army lurking so close to them. How could they take advantage of such a good opportunity? Being able to perform meritorious deeds is naturally the best. Meritorious deeds mean rewards, and as one becomes stronger, the likelihood of overcoming those dangerous years ahead also increases. The more she thought about it, the more restless Hermione's heart became, stirring him up to do something. After all, it's not very reliable to just wait here for the collapse of the Neptune army, and with the chaos at that time, it's hard to say if we can achieve any success. Chasing and killing the defeated soldiers also requires skill. If you rashly block in front of a large group of defeated soldiers, they will be submerged. Gradually, the desire for achievements outweighed the concern for risks. Anyway, let's get closer to the Nivjad camp and see what's going on. Let's get closer to the Nivjad people's camp. Heme looked at the camp swaying with the golden sun and said, "Go see if there are any opportunities, see what the camp of the black-clothed man looks like." Ah. Yes. Jerry had no doubts, he now had complete trust in Hermione, just a little surprised. The movement of the people of Eden was very smooth, and the battle on Mount Sodden caused the Imperial army to be in a hurry. Teams of Neptune's army were busy rushing to the front line, and they didn't even notice the Northerners moving in the forest. As she approached, Heme also saw the scene inside the Black Army camp. The Nivjad campsite is full of intrigue, with tents arranged neatly in black and gold colors and sun badges, in the standard Nivjad style, but these are not his concerns. He was focused on searching for the prisoners in the camp, or rather the slave detention facility. For the Imperial Army, the capture of slaves was second only to warfare in their military operations, and there must be slaves in the Imperial Army's camps. It was precisely because of this that Heme decided to approach the Black Army camp, and he felt that this could be utilized. Next, he also saw what he wanted, where the prisoners captured by the Nivjad were held in a fence outside the camp. The fence was quite far from the military camp, and the prisoners were like livestock being driven together, which gave Heme an idea. But the next thought was choked to death. As he took out his binoculars to see the situation inside the fence, he found that the prisoners were in poor condition, and most of them were powerless to stay there. These people seemed to even have problems walking. People who only have a small amount of clean clothes are in good spirits and should have been caught recently. However, I believe it won't be long before they will also be tossed and turned into a state of lack of energy. As an empire that has developed slavery into an important industry, slave owners naturally know how to better control their flocks and let them starve, which is the best way. However, they made the slave enclosure quite clean, without the feces and urine that Heme had imagined. Later on, he found out that the Nivjadians had killed all the people who had casually excreted in the fence, and the fence naturally became clean. The scenes he saw dispelled Heme's idea of liberating prisoners. His original intention was to disguise himself as Imperial mercenaries, sneak up to the slave fence to attack the guards, release all the slaves, and then flee into the forest with them. The Nivjords would definitely not be able to control them, but now it seems impossible. At this moment, several hurried-looking riders rushed over and ran past Hemet's eyes. Shortly after their arrival, the camp became restless. The battle on the front line of Mount Sodden was clearly not smooth for the black-clothed men, and Heme saw a large group of reserve forces being deployed to the battlefield. With the large-scale flow of people, the Nivjad camp became chaotic. The order was obviously very urgent, as even many capable wounded soldiers were mobilized, indicating that the frontline situation was very unfavorable for the Nivjad people. Even the disciplined Neptune army, faced with sudden and urgent orders, would fall into chaos, with soldiers unable to find generals and generals unable to find soldiers. Looking at the increasingly chaotic Nivjad camp due to the ongoing war ahead, Heme at once wanted to use the collected armor to disguise himself as an imperial army and infiltrate. After sneaking in, setting fire and causing destruction, making these southerners think they have been defeated, this is a huge achievement. But in the end, he still gave up these ideas for no reason, it was too risky and unnecessary. At present, it is obvious that the Nivjad people have mobilized the final reserve team, which indicates that the battle on Mount Sodden is becoming increasingly unfavorable for them. Why did they take such a big risk? Prisoners, yes, prisoners, those high-ranking officials must have run away early. Heme suddenly thought of this and slapped his head with a sudden realization. Those marshals and generals must have run away early. Isn't it better than taking risks to catch these guys on your own? After making up her mind, Heme didn't plan to move her nest, so she continued to wait here, waiting for the moment when Sodden Mountain was defeated. After almost an hour and a half, the signs of defeat had begun to appear, and some of the Nefertad's defeated soldiers had fled back from the front line one after another. Although they were quickly intercepted by the Imperial cavalry, they were driven into battle by the entire squad after executing a few of them. Heme understood that such a situation meant that the Imperial army was getting closer and closer to collapse. Quickly, several more defeated troops scattered from the front line, while the troops that had withdrawn from the front line looked extremely tired and demoralized, and the signs of the Nivjadians' defeat became increasingly evident. Very decisively, Heme led his subordinates to move towards the rear of the Imperial barracks. As for why it's the rear, of course it's because those generals and marshals must run away from there. Hemet's people took action, while the Nivjad people, who were increasingly exhausted due to the frontline war, completely ignored these movements in the forest. The people of Eden set up ambushes on the small path in the forest behind the military camp. Setting ambushes on the main road was too dangerous and easy to be besieged. By comparison, the small path is not only safe, but some big shots are also more likely to walk here. Shortly after their arrival, a fully armed group of Nivjadians arrived. They have black cloaks, helmets made of raven wing helmets, and plate armor adorned with golden suns. This is the uniform of the Nivjad officers that Heme had seen before, but now these Nivjad people are all dressed in this way, and their warhorses can only be raised from refined food. The cavalry were surrounded by a magnificent old man in armor like stars and moons. Although they were leading their troops on the run, they still maintained their dignity. Anyone could tell that he was a high-ranking official. These cavalry looked very panicked, obviously eager to leave this place, so the Empire must have been defeated on the front line. Seeing these, Hermione knew that this was exactly what they wanted, but he had prepared a big gift for this group of people. When the Nivjad people entered the ambush zone, the long-prepared lanyard was suddenly pulled up, tripping over the eager rider. There was also a big tree falling with a loud roar, and the team was split in half amidst the neighing of horses and the panic of riders. Although ambushed, these imperial men wearing feathered helmets were clearly elite, almost subconsciously protecting high-ranking officials in the center. The only thing is that the ambushed people of Eden were not meant to kill, to be precise, they did not kill that high-ranking official. Ambushed troops rushed out from all directions, and the previously uninhabited area is now filled with northerners, surrounding this attack team in the middle. Spears and halberds charged towards the cavalry in a row, and the advantage of using long weapons against the cavalry was fully demonstrated. It was difficult for the cavalry to cut them down, and they could easily stab the cavalry. Some isolated cavalry were dragged down from their warhorses by the rushing northerners, and then greeted with weapons in front of their faces. Under this combination of punches, the elite Neptune cavalry were killed in the dust, dying like lowly infantry crushed by them on a daily basis. The gathered cavalry is also at a disadvantage in the battle. They are being targeted by crossbowmen, defending against attacks while also being wary of crossbow arrows. Their casualties are constantly increasing. Hermione was also on the front line, holding a long gun and just stabbed a foolish person without a neck guard to death. Watching the person fall with blood on their neck, Hermione felt a frenzy. This guy should know how foolish it is to not wear a neck guard. Oh, he doesn't have a chance to change it either. In no time, most of the guards of that high-ranking official were killed, and a small number of people were still persevering. It was only a matter of time before they were taken down. Faced with such a situation, the high-ranking official was also very decisive, throwing his long sword in his hand and then lifting his hands, becoming the captive of the northern barbarians they described as. Upon seeing this, his subordinates immediately followed suit and raised their hands high. After disarming these Nivjad people, Heme naturally began to inquire about their identities immediately. Heme and these people were all low-level soldiers and certainly did not know those Nivjad high-ranking officials. But this person doesn't even speak the common language of the north, and there is no one among the people of Eden who can speak Nefaginian, which makes Herm speechless. There's no way, it seems that we can only know his identity when the king inspects him. Afterwards, Heme ambushed here for a while, but it was clearly not as good luck as before. Apart from a few waves of defeats, there were no achievements. Even they released several waves of defeated soldiers depending on the situation, because there were too many waves to eat. But Heme was also satisfied. That high-ranking official must have a high rank, and there were other prisoners. He must be the first northern army to bring back the prisoners, and these honors were already enough. And the soldiers below are even more overjoyed. With so many prisoners captured this time, everyone can definitely make a fortune. After confirming that she couldn't wait for a new defeat, Heme also decided to leave the forest with her own team. In order to prevent accidental strikes, Heme raised the flag of the Kingdom of Eden that had been kept hidden. And the fact proved that this was correct, because next they encountered the pursuing northerners. If it weren't for the flag, they would have been almost attacked by the momentum. After all, the cavalry chasing at the forefront would have found it hard to believe that someone was walking in front of them. From the soldiers they met, Heme learned that the North did indeed win a great victory in Mount Sodden. After inquiring about the whereabouts of the kings, Heme bid them farewell, and now it is important to report her own merits. Leaving the forest, he found that the strict imperial camp had now become a mess, and the northerners would not maintain the cleanliness of the Nivjad camp. Watching the northern soldiers turn the order and tidiness that the Nepalese people were proud of into dirty and chaotic, Heme felt a sense of pleasure and pain in her heart. Whether in his past life or present, he does not like Nivjad. He really doesn't like the country that boasts of civilization and then crazily kills, hunts slaves, exploits, and goes all out fishing. Nivjad has been going through a cycle. Searching for markets through war. Capturing slaves to expand production. Exporting goods to conquered areas. Not enough slaves and markets. Continuing the war. In order to ensure the export of goods from the Golden Tower City, Nivjad deliberately destroyed the productivity of the conquered areas during and after the war, leaving the local people barely surviving on agriculture. As for how to do it, during the war, it was naturally a frenzy of burning, killing, and looting. After the war, it was a deliberate indulgence of bandits to ensure that local commerce in the province could not develop. As for the industries and caravans of the Neptune people in these provinces, they have colluded and cannot move, leaving the locals to be harvested by Neptune for a lifetime. Nivjad is a prosperous civilization, but that only belongs to the city of the Golden Pagoda and its surrounding residents. What are the provincial people? It's just consumables waiting to be fully utilized. For the people of the provinces, Nivjad is not at all beautiful. He allows bandits and local snakes to run rampant, and there are also high-priced imperial commodities that can squeeze out every coin from them, not to mention the empire's suppression of rebellions. Nivjad was not afraid of provincial rebellion at all, because suppressing the provinces meant plundering and capturing slaves, and could further shatter the local political structure, allowing Nivjad's goods to penetrate further. That's why Heme doesn't like Nivjad, and compared to this empire full of exploitation and oppression, the feudal states in the north seem so normal. Returning to the present moment, the prisoners they were escorting along the way attracted the attention of many pursuing northern troops. Heme and his team had captured more than 40 prisoners, and in the early stages of the pursuit, capturing so many prisoners was very eye-catching, not to mention the magnificent armor inside. Then Heme and the others chased faster. Now is the time to get rich, we need to hurry and let others take the lead. Through the pursuit crowd, Heme arrived at the foot of Mount Sodden, and before his eyes was a bloody land. The traces created by the sorcerer's fireballs and lightning are particularly evident in this slaughterhouse, as they dealt a huge blow to the Nivjad people. But there are also such traces in the camp of the Northern Alliance, and it is estimated that only the kings are absolutely safe because they are protected by sorcerers. Looking at everything in front of her, Heme was only grateful that she had escaped this battle. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Unexpected Encounters. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Unexpected Encounters. The location of the king is easy to find, and the place with the golden red flag is the location of the Demavi king. However, even so, they still have to cross a wide battlefield, and the longer they walk on the battlefield, the more deaths they see. In some places, the bodies of people and horses are intertwined, and to make matters worse, they are fused into one in the flames, creating an extremely disgusting and terrifying scene. The smell of rust was everywhere, and Heme saw several bloody lakes. God knows how much blood was flowing here and how many people died. Heme endured discomfort and walked under the golden red mountain emblem on the black flag. The Demavid king was there, surrounded by the Knights of Eden, as if surrounded by steel. No one stopped them, and the escorted Nivjadians said they were here to offer prisoners to the king. No one would ruin the king's favorite scene. King Demavi is in his 40s this year. The black background gold-red mountain pattern on the small shield adorns the king's chest, and the magnificent cloak is also fixed. The muscles on both sides of his cheeks are somewhat relaxed, so even the king's attire cannot show how majestic he is. As a monarch, Demavi appeared somewhat lazy and lacking in authority, but those eyes that occasionally flashed with cunning and spiritual light undoubtedly told those with intentions not to be deceived by this appearance. Serchik was also standing beside the king, his armor was dark gold and very conspicuous. Several scratches could be seen on the armor of the White Knight, and the blood was all there, indicating that he had fought desperately on the battlefield before. Serchik was talking to a bald sorcerer at the moment, and Heme knew that the person was a Birded, a palace sorcerer from Eden. He should have been guarding the king before, but Serchik turned his head. Seeing Heme and his people, Serchik's eyes flashed with a hint of surprise. He thought Heme and the others had encountered something unexpected, but then calmed down again. "Salute to you, your majesty the king." He knelt before the monarch's warhorse, appearing particularly respectful. "I am Heme, who was ordered by Lord Selchuk to cross the Yaruga River 3 days ago to fight. Now I have brought prisoners to your majesty." "Oh. Really? That's really great." The king's mood was obviously good. "You are the first group of people in the entire Northern Alliance to bring back so many prisoners, knights. Then let me take a look at your prisoners." There was no need for Heme to give an order, so his subordinates pushed the Nivjadians over, and the leader was naturally the high-ranking official. This high-ranking official no longer has the arrogance he had before, and his mood appears unusually low. In the words of the soldiers, this is like a defeated general. Especially when facing the scrutiny of King Demavi, his head lowered below. And as he gazed at the prisoner for a moment, the king's expression suddenly became bright, with a look of joy and pride. Marshal Erd, I can't believe that the prisoner brought to me by this knight is actually you, who has contributed so much to the expansion and neutrality of the empire. It seems that the army of Nivjad is not as strong as you previously claimed. It's a pity to meet under such circumstances, your majesty the king. If our positions could be swapped, I would be even happier. But I believe that in the future, the empire will definitely be able to do so, and northerners will eventually beg for mercy in front of the empire. In the face of Demavi's satire, the marshal remained neither humble nor arrogant, and even retorted. "It's already this time and I'm still here with my sharp tongue. Unfortunately, the future you're talking about has nothing to do with you. Someone, take this black-clothed man down and call the interrogator. We need to uncover everything that this Nivjad knows." At the king's command, 2 Ardean knights immediately took over the captured marshal and rudely brought him down. At the moment of being escorted around, Heme saw Marshal Erd's face darken a lot and his mood drop a lot, indicating that his previous nonchalant demeanor was just a pretense. "Knight, you did well, and the kingdom will remember your achievements." After the Nivjadians were taken down, King Demavi looked at the knight who had brought him this important prisoner, his eyes full of satisfaction. This prisoner fell into the hands of the people of Eden, undoubtedly allowing the kingdom to dominate the battle. Therefore, the king looked at the knights who had given him the prisoners and became happy. His achievements deserve a heavy reward, and King Demavi is willing to reward him, so he still offered a large price. "I will give you the title and territory of a baron, and from today on, you will no longer be an ordinary knight. You will be a nobleman who holds territory and a castle." "Thank you very much, Your Majesty the King." Heme quickly knelt down to thank him, saying that what Demavi had thrown out was indeed a great reward. Many people were envious of his gains this time. "However, Your Majesty, I would like to ask you to give my subordinates some rewards. If it weren't for their bravery in crossing the Yaruga River with me, we wouldn't have captured such important prisoners." Herm's words made his subordinates feel grateful, and this officer did not forget them. He still remembered to fight for their interests. The reason why Heme did this is simple. No matter when, having a reputation for taking care of his subordinates is always good. "You remember your subordinates, that's great, Selchuk." Demavi called out to his white knight, "Draw a sum of money from my treasury, let these brave young men have a good time, and let my generosity spread throughout the north." "Yes, Your Majesty." Next, Heme respectfully stepped down from the king's presence. He had already obtained everything he wanted, and the kings had always been busy. It was time to leave. Heme returned to the camp with his subordinates, and at this moment, the camp was empty, with no one except for some idle servants. Everyone else is busy catching prisoners on the battlefield and getting rich, but they don't need it. They have already become rich. The people of Eden locked up the prisoners of Neptune, who could also be exchanged for ransom. Then they returned to their tent to rest and slept in the wilderness for so long, still feeling comfortable in bed. Several hours had passed before the other soldiers returned to the camp with exhaustion and excitement of wealth, while Heme and his subordinates had already taken a good night's sleep, preparing for the evening celebration. A tradition of victory. That night, next to the bloody battlefield, the Northern Alliance held a grand ceremony. Firstly, people mourned the deaths in this battle, and the king and sorcerers also mentioned that the names of the 14 sorcerers who died on Mount Sodden would be engraved on the boulders there to recognize their great contributions. However, Hermione knew that one of them was actually not dead, and that was the famous Therese Marigold, but it was true that she had been burned to ashes. Hermione has no interest in greeting such a reputation, as the saying goes, these are too far away from him. And as someone who understands what those female sorcerers have done, Hermione feels scared when he thinks of these women, which leads him to wonder if he should get himself a magic-blocking golden talisman to wear. The living are extremely excited to survive this bloody battle, and they try their best to stuff meat and wine into their stomachs, as if they haven't eaten for a long time. Even the kings let go of their pride and raised their glasses to each other, chatting about victory and the future. The Demavid king was the one with the loudest laughter, and the capture of a Marshal Nivjad earned him face in front of the kings. Some people, on the other hand, do not like the scene of recklessness and return to their tents after they have had enough to eat. Heme is one of them. At the banquet, he mainly looked at the 5 northern kings, Vismer of Redania, Forest of Timolia, Demavi of Eden, Hunset of Cordwin, and Mivi of Levia. Seeing the kings in these novels and games appearing in front of her, Heme felt very subtle. But after watching for a while, he also lost interest, so he simply left. On the way back to the tent, people kept greeting him, and as his achievements echoed through the camp, more and more people knew him. His subordinates cheered excitedly at him. Because of Heme's request to the king, each of them received a sum of gold and silver that was enough to squander for a long time, which was undoubtedly the best thing for the soldiers. If someone speaks ill of him now, these soldiers who used to complain about him will come out to defend his reputation in the first place. It has to be said that this form is really unpredictable. However, when Hermione arrived at his tent, she found several soldiers led by Jerry already waiting there. Upon seeing Herm's arrival, they immediately bowed respectfully. "What's wrong, my friends? Why are you waiting for me here if you don't go play well?" These people are obviously being asked, they look at me and I look at you, looking a bit awkward. And Hermione was not in a hurry, waiting for them to speak, and in her heart, she guessed what they wanted to say, but that kind of thing was ultimately something they had to say themselves. "Baron," Jerry spoke up, "we hope to join you and be loyal to you." Heme didn't speak, let them continue speaking. "You are about to become a baron. Although I don't know where your territory is, many brothers still hope to join you. Of course, for a better future. We are just selected representatives. Please accept our loyalty, Baron." Given Herm's current achievements and reputation, it is normal for someone to seek refuge. After all, if one cannot manage it well, they can transform from a commoner to a knight. How could they not seize this opportunity, as these soldiers led by Heme are close to water and have the moon first? "You are very honest, that's great, Jerry. Of course, I accept your loyalty, and I welcome anyone to come and serve under my command. It can be said that someone gives pillows whenever they want to sleep, and Heme is currently short of people. These experienced veterans are undoubtedly suitable subordinates." Next, Jerry and everyone exclaimed 1,000 thanks, but Hermione finally made them step down and walk into the tent. Sitting on his own marching bed, looking at the roof of the tent, a sense of achievement surged in Heme's heart. I made all the right choices these days, and he was able to transform from a wealthy knight to a baron. It's truly amazing. With such a sense of satisfaction, Herm fell asleep unconsciously. That night, he had a beautiful dream, an incredibly beautiful dream, in which he became the ruler of the entire north. And while Herm was in a beautiful dream, inside the king's tent, the Nivjad king, who had finished the feast, was worrying about what to give Herm. Before outsiders, the Nivjad king always had a somewhat lazy appearance, and that lack of authority was difficult to be wary of. Few people still remember that the king relied on himself to avoid the assassination of Timolia agents when he was a minor, and in the eyes of the public, Nivjad always looked like an incompetent person. But if he were just as he appeared on the surface, Eden would have long been defeated in the struggle of the northern kings. For example, now, when everyone thought the king would go and sing with his mistress all night, he is looking at the documents piled up during the day. With the victory of the battle, various types of information flood like dams, which need to be processed. Nivjad is certain that the northern kings who were drinking and having fun with him also processed his information after returning. Before the arrival of the Black Army, the northern kings had been fighting against each other for so many years, knowing each other's roots and depths, and knowing that there was no place on the opposite side that looked like it on the surface. However, Miwei disdained to do some superficial work and was too lazy to do these disguises. And now, he is feeling a headache for the land given to Heme. Although agreeing to a title is incredibly satisfying, when it comes to giving it, it really gives people a headache. Aden is a country with a long history and strong national strength, which often means one thing, that is, the existing land in the country has already been divided up by various nobles. However, dividing the royal territory was a difficult decision to make. In this era, the northern kings were striving to strengthen their own power and control over the whole country. In this situation, dividing the king's territory has become a difficult thing to allow. Although no one would say that increasing the number of powerful nobles is a foolish thing, everyone regards it as such. The king regarded this as undermining centralization, and the old nobles did not want any new members of the noble class, so the number of nobles above knights was decreasing. But King Demavi also had no intention of swallowing the territory promised to Heme. At best, this would affect the stability of the army. In novels, he would have to bear the reputation of breaking his promise, so his main headache was which territory to give to Heme. However, his troubles were resolved with a letter brought by Selçuk. "Selçuk, you're really here at the right time." King Demavi picked up the letter with his hand full of rings. "This information has taught me how to place that lone hero. That place must be very suitable for him to showcase his skills. Hackland." "Alright, but your majesty, why are you so certain in your tone, as if you're sure he'll accept this place?" Selçuk certainly knew where the letter came from, so he asked. "I believe he won't refuse," Demavi confidently said, while he began drafting the edict, his slightly chubby fingers holding a feather pen to write. "I believe that our hero is a person who dares to take risks, and what he will gain in Hackland is countless times more than what he will gain in the country of Eden. But he needs to fight for it all." Selçuk pointed out without hesitation what the king had in mind. You really don't know how to be obscure, it's not conducive to your future activities in the court." King Demavi smiled ill-intently and said, "This is the so-called way of monarchy. It's just that I'll give him more compensation." The next day, after getting up early in the morning, Heme received news of his new territory from the king's envoy who came to convey the message. "Hackland, the king wants me to go to Hackland. Is there a way to that place in the north?" Hackland, Heme still knows this name, it is a grassland that is active with countless nomads. These nomads invaded the west almost 100 years after the end of the story of the demon hunters, and at that time, the Neptune Empire spent a huge cost to drive out these grassland invaders. But now that we are so far away from that time, how could we mention the place of Hackland? The kingdom discovered a road to Hackland almost half a year ago, directly crossing the Blue Mountains. It was Selçuk who came to convey the command, explaining the causes and consequences of all of this. After the people of the kingdom passed by, they found that many northerners had already lived there. "We kept asking and found out that they had crossed the Blue Mountains 100 years ago and arrived here. Your Majesty allocated a considerable amount of resources to expand his power here at that time. As the power of the kingdom entered, some locals became dependent on the kingdom, and we were able to establish a stronghold there. Now that the stronghold has been completed, it can be used as a baron's title for you. Your Majesty has also promised that you can expand there on your own, giving you the title of Commander of Hackland and giving you full control over Hackland affairs. This is really unimaginable, Hackland, such a distant land." As Selçuk spoke, Heme murmured softly, her tone full of surprises, as his territory suddenly jumped out of the story of the demon hunters. Selçuk looked at Heme like this and instinctively thought that the knight was scared by Hackland, and this emotion was normal, which made him feel ashamed. Selçuk is known as the White Knight for a reason. He is known as the Knight's Flower of Eden not only for his strength, but also for his noble character. So he went on to speak out about the king's command of, not to speak, Knight Hermes, if you don't want to, then His Majesty the King has prepared another piece of land for you in Eden. No. Heme quickly interrupted him, I am very willing. The choice given by His Majesty the King is really great, and I am very grateful to His Majesty the King. His words stunned Selçuk, and he then looked at the knight with a strange gaze. Are you sure? Very certain. Heme kept saying, as if the knight would go back on his word the next second. Okay, the corresponding documents will be sent later, and the king will bestow a title on you. I'll leave first. Selçuk shook his head as he walked, and Hermione's reaction. Really unexpected. For the first time, he felt that the knight was unpredictable and even took the initiative to jump into the pit of fire. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Return to hometown recruitment. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 6 Return to Hometown Recruitment. If ordinary people in this world hear that they are going to Hackland, they will naturally quickly refuse. Because Hackland is a distant country like Saracania, in people's eyes it is already another world, and few people are willing to leave their familiar places. Moreover, Western societies, including the North and Nivjad, have a negative evaluation and perception of Hackland. In their stereotypical impression, the distant Hackland is a land filled with barbarians and robbers. Although this is largely close to reality. But Heme is different. For him, Hackland represents an opportunity to step out of the north. Although Hackland is full of unknowns and dangers, it is also full of opportunities and wealth. There, he may not only be able to fulfill his own life-saving idea, but may even climb higher. And this is impossible in the north, as the power in the north has already been divided up and there is no room for any newcomers. Even if it were to become a Baron of Eden, it would probably only be guarding this land for a lifetime, facing the frenzy of the Northern War. Eden was defeated like a mountain in the Second Northern War. In this situation, if one wants to go higher, the only way is to participate in court politics. However, letting him play court politics is tantamount to suicide, and in the best case, it is just to accompany him. So Hackland became the best choice, where he had a lot of room for development. And now there are still 4 years left until the start of the Second Northern War, which is enough for him to do something there. To put it 10,000 steps back, when the Second Northern War in Eden falls like a mountain, and the kings are forced to run to Nivjad, whether or not to send troops to participate in the war is not a matter of mood. It's also good to be a local tyrant in Hackland. So he eagerly agreed to the choice given by King Demavi, which was exactly what he needed. Moreover, to put it further, as a traveler, Heme is very afraid of the fate of this world, which runs through the original work of the Demon Hunter. Jumping out of the north also means jumping out of the story and out of the tide of fate. But he sees it this way, but others don't. When Selchuk reported his choices and reactions to the king, the words of King Demavi clearly reflected everyone's attitude. Did he get a fever and burn his brain out? He really wants to go to Hackland. But as the saying goes, King Demavi is still very happy that the matter has been resolved smoothly. When King Demavi appointed Heme as Baron Saza and commander of Hackland, the onlookers below looked at his happy expression and wondered if this person was mentally ill. There is no other reason, in everyone's opinion, this is really strange. Being assigned to such a place without getting angry or excited must be due to a brain problem. This also affected the soldiers who had previously been loyal to Heme. A small number of people decided to withdraw upon hearing about going to Hackland, and they did not want to go to that wilderness. Jerry was very embarrassed about this and kept apologizing to Hermione, but Hermione wasn't angry either. He just said it was nothing. Yes, it's nothing. Compared to the resources he has obtained, what he has now is nothing at all. It seems that because he felt that Herme's brain was not working well and he was too pitiful, King Demavi increased his support to him. The king told Heme that the Kingdom of Eden would provide him with a large amount of food, tools, and weapons, allowing him to freely recruit immigrants within the country, and exempting his territory from 4 years of taxation. And the king also stated that refugees from south of the Yaruga River will be sent to Baron Saza in Hackland as human support for the king. Heme was aware that this was actually throwing the blame. For the Kingdom of Eden, how to accommodate these people was a troublesome matter, and throwing them away for exploration was undoubtedly the most appropriate. However, Heme doesn't mind taking on this pot either. With stable material support from the kingdom, these immigrants will only be his help. King Demavi stated that these supplies and manpower will gather before the Blue Mountain Tunnel heading to Hackland, and now he has time to return to his territory to tidy up, and the king also allows him to recruit immigrants along the way. So shortly after becoming a baron, Heme set out to his territory to pack up things that could be brought to Hackland. Coincidentally, he went north with the disbanded Northern Alliance. After all, the Nivjad people had been stopped. So, besides the kings and their standing army, everyone else should naturally be disbanded. The kings of the north still have to argue with the Nivjad envoys who come here at an unknown time, and no one else can use them. So on the way, soldiers returning home could be seen everywhere, and everyone was very excited. The war has made everyone rich, and now they have a bulging waist and a belly full of stories, so their emotions are naturally excited and high. Heme and others are naturally the same. He also leads a considerable team, and Heme's subordinates now have 34 people, all retired veterans from the army of Eden. As the team advanced on the road, the military song always sounded from time to time, and everything looked so full of vitality. However, Heme always instinctively joined them, immersed in such an atmosphere, thinking that it would be great if it could continue like this. Just thinking that this peace was only temporary, and that even more brutal battles had not yet arrived, for years later it would be that brutal battle, he felt a twinge of tightness in his heart. After leaving Mount Sodden, they entered the kingdom of Livia, and they walked along the edge of the Mahakhan Mountains, with the magnificent mountains as the background for their journey. The people are very welcoming to the returning soldiers, on the one hand because they have prevented the advance of the Black Army, and on the other hand, the people are aware that the soldiers who have successfully returned from the battlefield have a lot of money in their wallets and can do a lot of business with them. Heme ignored those things, and now the important thing is to return to their territory. They crossed Livia and arrived at the Kingdom of Eden. Returning to the kingdom makes everyone feel relieved. Seeing the familiar golden and red flag makes everyone feel relieved. It's better to feel at home. From the beginning of entering Eden, Heme would wander around every village and city he encountered, recruiting immigrants willing to go to Hackland. Jerry gave many good suggestions. As an old sergeant, he often recruits soldiers in various villages and towns, and he already knows what everyone likes to listen to. Moreover, Heme's conditions are still very favorable. Tax exemption in the territory means extremely light taxes, material subsidies mean tools and livestock, not to mention the opportunities everywhere on the new territory. Unfortunately, when they found out that Heme's territory was in Hackland, most people refused to solicit it. In everyone's eyes, it was another world, a dangerous world, and Hackland's reputation exacerbated this situation. But in the end, there are still some people who can be recruited. There are always people who urgently need to embark on another path. Faced with the conditions proposed by Heme, they can only choose to join. Gradually, by the time Heme reached his hometown of Essenland, the number of immigrants behind him had reached over 100. This, combined with the results of the soldier's family, is enough to show how difficult it is to recruit people. Along the way, Heme witnessed the prosperity of the Kingdom of Eden, and the boundless wheat fields left a deep impression on him. The numerous workshops in the city were even more spectacular. Both urban and rural areas are full of vitality, with continuous construction and recruitment everywhere. And the people dress appropriately and are wealthy, which is enough to reflect their living standards. This is the root of the strength of the Kingdom of Eden, but the thought that these would all turn into ashes in the Second Northern War made it a pity for Heme. Maybe in the future, I can change all of this. After thinking about their future fate, such thoughts would come to Heme's mind. However, the territory of Eden is not entirely peaceful, and in fact, he has discovered traces of the activities of the Squirrel Party. The so-called Squirrel Party is a non-human guerrilla group that stood up under the instigation of the Southern Empire, hoping to drive humanity out of the sea. The Squirrel Party mainly carries out various raids and massacres, and they use all means to cause damage to the northern countries, so they do not mind committing atrocities. And northerners never give in to the Squirrel Party, and guerrilla fighters who fall into the hands of northerners will end up very miserable. Heme had witnessed such a scene several times with his own eyes, and the corpses of the hanged elves and dwarves left a deep impression on him. On the main roads, such scenes are never uncommon, as the military intimidates potential guerrilla fighters with hanging bodies. With the behavior of the Squirrel Party, human hostility towards non-human races has become increasingly strong, and more non-human races have been squeezed out. As a result, more and more young non-human races have joined the squirrel party, forming a bad vicious cycle. But then again, it was expected by the instigator behind the scenes that this was completely hitting the dead end of the Northern Kingdom. But fortunately, the squirrel party is still limited to some areas, and Aden has not completely become chaotic yet. Heme's team is still very safe, and they have successfully arrived in Essenland. Eisenland is an important town in the northwest of the Kingdom of Eden, and can be said to be the economic center of the kingdom. After leaving Floating Port, the first stop for merchants heading to Eden is definitely this city. And Heme's territory is just outside the walls of Eisenland. To Heme's delight, his former parents have all died, and there are only some distant relatives waiting for him here. He doesn't have to worry about how to deal with them because he doesn't have many interactions on weekdays. However, what he didn't expect was that upon returning to Essenland, the local elders and officials held a welcoming ceremony to welcome the freshly baked Baron. Heme naturally understood their meaning and wisely donated a sum of money to the city council. After receiving the money, the city council immediately began to cooperate with Heme in recruiting immigrants. Don't be fooled by the fact that this matter seems like soliciting bribes. In fact, it is a treatment only available in my hometown. Other places can only prove Heme's identity by taking Heme's money. Now it is the local government who helps Heme. Eisenland was very happy that they had a baron, so he was so dedicated to helping Heme, and some figures in the city and region of Eisenland also wanted their sons to explore some industries in other areas. It would be great to catch the fast train of Heme, the appointed baron. During the recruitment gap, Heme took a look at his ancestor's tower and realized that he had to go home. The tower of the Heme family stands on a small hill not far from the city, which is a 3-story tower. There are 3 small villages under his jurisdiction, all under the watchtower, with a population of only 400 people, and it is these 300 people who provided his armor and horses. Heme's return was welcomed by the villagers, which was much more sincere than the calculated welcome of Eisenland before. Heme and his father were both known for their gentleness as lords who would pay to purchase tools for farmers, making them very popular among them. There are also many people here willing to follow Heme to adventure and immigrate, with a total of 30 men and women joining the ranks of immigrants, which directly accounts for 1/3 of his recruitment through most of the Asian continent. Out of gratitude, Heme promised the villagers 4 years of tax exemption. Although he left, this knightly territory still belonged to him. And told them to use the saved money as much as possible to arm themselves, and there must be a big war ahead. The villagers also believed his words very much. After all, Heme and his son were reliable lords and had not done anything harmful to them. Under the farewell of the villagers, Heme left the territory and then went to visit several relatives of the family. There are not many nobles among these relatives, not even knights. They are all wealthy merchants and craftsmen, but they can at least generously donate, and the relatives are willing to assist him as the new baron. In layman's terms, Heme's family is the local leader of Eisenland. Most people know them, and there are people from many industries who belong to them, but in terms of strength, they are not much stronger. The Heme family is a family with a long history in Essenland, but unfortunately, during the Heme generation, the Heme family maintained its aristocratic status. However, many members of the family still have significant influence in the local area. During the visit to relatives, Heme also took in a boy named Viato as his attendant. He was 15 years old and looked very clever. He was Heme's distant cousin. What he currently lacks is an attendant. Heme's former attendant died shortly after arriving at the military camp, and he was in need of an attendant to handle his belongings and most importantly, to wear armor. Viato is the son of a blacksmith master, and he has a distant relationship with Heme's relatives, but it does not affect their interactions. This young man has a head of black hair. Whenever he stands in front of Hermione, his face, which still has acne, always becomes nervous and his work is obviously unfamiliar. However, Heme is not in a hurry either. The attendants always need to be trained. He has plenty of time, and this young man looks quite clever. He can definitely educate him. Viato is a typical young man, full of poetry and glory in his mind, and Heme is the hero in his eyes and the idol he admires. Poets wrote a large number of songs about Hermione's capture of the Southern Marshal, making him a well-known figure. Hermione only has a headache about this. He doesn't want to become famous in this way. Fame is a good thing, but this kind of reputation will only bring trouble on the battlefield in the future. On the other hand, relying on the reputation and military achievements of Hemera's father, the Eisenland government brought out a full 100 people for Hemera. Hermione couldn't help but sigh, as he had traveled through half of the continent to recruit around 100 people. His hometown immediately pulled out this number, and in the end, it was still better for his hometown people. After all, the people in my hometown have a deep understanding of Heme and his family. It is because of this understanding that everyone trusts this knight and dares to follow him. Looking at other places, an unknown knight is recruiting immigrants with an unknown document, even with the endorsement of the local government. It's so suspicious to see this, and naturally unwilling to follow. Therefore, when Heme recruited people, he encountered obstacles everywhere, which was extremely difficult. After collecting enough resources to obtain from her hometown, Heme tidied up the things inside the family tower, took what she wanted to take away, sealed what needed to be sealed, and then embarked on a journey to the east. They advanced along the Ponthal River, and the Blue Mountain Tunnel was right there. As she walked, Heme also received information from various parties, analyzing the situation in Hackland while understanding the political situation. During his leisure time, Heme would tell stories to his soldiers about how to use his brain to wage war. The protagonists in the story do not use martial arts and bravery to defeat enemies like heroes in traditional northern epics. They use intimidation and strategy to defeat opponents. This kind of story, which is different from traditional poetry, attracted the attention of many people, and even immigrants followed suit to listen, just like listening to a poet telling a story. In such a situation, everyone's relationship with Heme was also brought closer. Gradually, others also took advantage of this opportunity to showcase their talents for everyone, and this journey was filled with laughter and joy. Regarding what Heme said, others were listening to the story, but there was one person who was very serious, and he was Jerry. Sergeant immediately recognized the profound meaning behind Heme's storytelling. These stories were clearly adaptations of military examples, indicating that Heme intended to cultivate future talents. Jerry decided to work harder and maybe become a knight in the future. The sergeant followed Hermione to further his career, and he wouldn't miss this opportunity. On the way to the east, Heme naturally gathered people everywhere, but unfortunately, she was almost at her destination, and she only managed to bring the total number of immigrants to 260. But Heme is not worried either. With the chaos in the northern situation, monsters running everywhere, and the increasing risk of the Second Civil War, many people will eventually choose to leave. Most wealthy people have gone to Kerviel, and some poor people will definitely choose Hackland, as they will be able to absorb many immigrants. As time passed, the Blue Mountain Range suddenly appeared in front of them. It was a majestic mountain that had long blocked the connection between the west and Hackland. Heme knew that this was the mountain range she had taken to cross, heading to the other side of the grassland, the Hackland grassland. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Hackland Ecology. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Hackland Ecology. After entering the Blue Mountains, Heme and his group stopped in the ancient city or ancient ruins of Lam. The reason for staying here is simple, as it is the place where Heme receives support from the kingdom. Lam, this ancient ruins originally belonged to the Lizard Man. After the decline of the Lizard Man, the elves occupied this place, and then it was humans who destroyed this elven city, causing it to be abandoned. This ruin should have been ignored and no one would have come until it became the venue of the Northern Summit, but now with him appointed to explore Hackland, it has gained a lot of popularity. Under the remaining pillars and walls, refugees expected to be relocated to Hackland cleared the debris from the stone floor and then built tents. The pot was filled with food, most of which were wild vegetables and mushrooms they found in the ruins, along with some relief food from the kingdom. The smoke repeatedly rose to the sky, giving the ruins a lot of vitality. The refugees are all worried about the future, only the children are still playing carefree in the ruins. The children see the ruins as a maze, waiting for them to discover the treasures inside. This is too dangerous, why doesn't anyone take care of these children? Jerry frowned and looked at the wild children running around. There might be some monsters in Lom's underground finger, he said. Children, that's it. Hermione looked at them and said, and the loss of the child may have relieved the burden on these parents. Besides, when the time comes, we'll just go find the demon hunters. Heme has some understanding of the mentality of farmers, and he has no intention of doing anything. He's not even stable in his butt, so why bother with all this? Ha! Are those people dwarves? Looking in the direction pointed out by Viato, Herm saw some short and sturdy figures drinking together. Their voices were loud, and they were discussing rude topics with various profanities, almost overwhelming the combined voices of others. Well, yes, I remember the king promised to send me a dwarf engineering team. Heme recalled her conversation with King Demavi and said, it seems they are there. I'm glad to have these professional craftsmen to help, but I didn't expect there to be so many. I thought there were only a dozen or so dwarves. When Heme and his team evaluated the crowd in the ruins of Lom, they also discovered Heme. The refugees knew that their next owner's flag was a flying falcon, so many people came forward to greet the future master after seeing that flag. Herm warmly received them and comforted them with kind words, confirming the tax exemption promised by the king to them. This is what refugees care most about. They were forced to leave their homes due to the invasion of the Black Army, and settling down in a new place requires a lot of upfront costs. If they still bear heavy taxes at this time, what they can do is flee again. After calming the people, Heme arrived at an area filled with black, gold, and red tents, which was the garrison set up by the Kingdom of Eden. The news of Herm's arrival had already arrived, and everyone at the camp had already come out to welcome the Baron. When Hemet's figure appeared, the fully armed crowd immediately straightened their backs, as if facing a general's parade. Soldiers, who is your commander? Heme gestured to others to settle the crowd he brought and then asked them. It's me, I'm Captain Maelna, Baron Heme. We were sent to you by the king, and we have 30 people. The young captain stood up, obviously proud of his military identity, and the golden red mountain emblem was polished shiny. The Night Sun. Hermione felt that this person didn't seem to come from a commoner background, and his attire clearly had the style of a knight family, so she asked, and the person nodded as well. It's the second son, sir, he added. I have seen your subordinates, Captain. You have trained them very well, let them disband. Now let's talk inside the tent. This is not a suitable place for conversation, I want to know the supplies provided by your majesty. Yes. There wasn't much in Malenga's tent, so Heme sat directly at the table and poured the wine on the table into the silver cup next to her. On the other side, Captain Maelna took out a document from the box. The data is here. King Demavi has provided you with 717 southern refugees, a Mahakan dwarven construction team of 100 people, and most importantly, enough food for 3,000 people to eat for the first half of the year. The weapons and tools have been delivered to your Baron Saza's possession, which I personally escorted. After you arrive at your territory, the king will continue to provide supplies. Maelna spoke in a very organized manner and was not at all flustered when facing Herme, which surprised Herme. He had originally thought that the king would casually send an inexperienced young man. It seems that the king has indeed put in a lot of effort, providing real gold, silver, and talents to support his immigration. He originally thought that King Demavi would play some word games to some extent, but now it seems that he is still making malicious speculations. That's really great. Thank you very much for your help from His Majesty. After finishing the scene fell silent for a while, and then Hemet talked about what he really wanted to ask. Captain Mailna, have you been to Hackland? Yes, I have been there, Baron Heme. I was also one of the first Hackland investigators sent by the kingdom. Then tell me what kind of land it is. Hackland. I remember you should have already received the king's report. Why are you still asking me? I may not know more than you do. I know, Heme shook his hand, but I want to hear people who have been there talk to me about it. Okay, your command. Mailna sat on a chair at Heme's signal and began talking about the distant land. Regarding the setting of the Hackland society, except for the existence of the evil god Lilite faith and nomadic grasslands, everything else is privately created by myself, as this is an area that the author and CDPR have not mentioned. Please pay attention to this. Hackland. This is a land ruled by grasslands, and everywhere you can see is an endless expanse of grasslands. Lord Heme, you really should take a good look at that scene. The feeling when driving on it is even more wonderful, and the whole person feels liberated. When Mailna mentioned these things, a longing expression appeared in his eyes, and Hermione didn't say anything, just looked at him and continued speaking. But this is a difficult land, where the Hackland tribes often engage in brutal battles for grasslands and resources. I have delved deep into the grasslands and witnessed firsthand the battles between the Hackland tribes, where men were killed and women became the victor's spoils. The worst part is that some tribes who believe in the evil god Lilite would turn their heads into small mountains to deter their enemies. The captain furrowed his forehead, obviously in his eyes, all of this was too barbaric. Herme was not surprised by this, as it was exactly what a nomadic society should have, and it was very in line with his expectations for Hackland. However, your territory is still relatively safe. After crossing the Blue Mountain Tunnel, what appears in front of us is a land scattered with hills and forests. Its name is Cossack land, and a river separates a piece of land from it, which is the place where you rule. But the residents above are not Hackland nomads. 100 years ago, the road between the north and Hackland was still smooth, and some northerners crossed the Blue Mountains and settled here. Over time, there were also many people here who had been assimilated to a certain extent by the Hackland people, but still retained traces of belonging to the northerners, with a recognition of the north. Tell me in detail about these people and my territory. This is exactly what Herm is most concerned about. It is something that is vague in the report given to him, and what exactly is the situation with the residents on his territory who are nominally his own. These people claim to be Cossacks, and it is said that in the common language 100 years ago, they meant exiles. They were all armed residents, with weapons and equipment at home. Some had war horses but little armor, but archery supplemented their shortcomings in this area. They were also strong infantry, and even the strongest Kazakh cavalry would not rush to attack them when facing a Cossack army. When the war broke out, they would support the leader known as the Atamans, who led the Cossack war gang activities. Faced with a large-scale invasion of the Turks, these Atamans would choose a Getman to lead all the Cossacks against the Turks. However, most Getmen were dismissed after the war ended, and only a few people in Cossack history continued to hold this title, becoming the nominal rulers of this land. The center of the Cossacks is Shech, which is a sturdy wooden fortress. I have been there several times, and there are thousands of Cossacks stationed there for a long time. They regard it as the standing army of this land and the first wave of power against the Hacklanders. Only Gateman has the power to lead them. As for your territory, it is a very small part of this Cossack society. The river called the Tsar River blocks most of your territory and grasslands, and the Cossacks above are not many or strong. That's why we decided to establish a base here. Mailna clearly spent a considerable amount of time in Hackland and had a deep understanding of these nomadic and semi-nomadic residents. Hme couldn't help but sigh inwardly that he had asked the right person. What is their attitude towards the invasion of the power of the Kingdom of Eden? Heme asked these people about their attitude towards the kingdom, which is crucial for his rule. Well, most people are indifferent to this and insist on any attitude. They don't resist the power of the kingdom coming, because after trading with us, the Cossacks found that they could obtain various goods from Eden. Life in Kazakhstan was still very difficult, and their weapons and tools were always scarce, which was exactly what they needed. So when we built Sazarburg, the Cossacks didn't make any obstacles. But I think it was actually because those powerful Cossack war gangs didn't notice us, otherwise things wouldn't have been so smooth. Okay, I understand, Captain. Thank you very much for your message. I believe you will have a very important position in my territory in the future. He made a promise, and Malenga's understanding of Hackland was completely sufficient for him to make a promise. Thank you very much, Baron. Malenga's eyes flashed with excitement. It seemed that he could really become a knight if he didn't manage to be loyal to this Baron himself. After bidding farewell to Maelna, Heme went to his tent and gathered the information she knew. After listening to the information that Maelna knew, Heme also had a clear idea of her position in Hackland. There, he will play the role of using northern goods to attract Cossacks and even the Hacklanders, and achieve influence on these forces by importing goods. As far as I know, Hackland can be said to be a good dumping ground for goods in northern countries. As a result, Heme thought of many things. As a traveler, he knew that in the future, the north would face the dumping of goods from the Neptune Empire, and many northern industries would be affected. If Heme can smoothly import northern goods into Hackland and open up this commodity market, then this impact will naturally be mitigated, and the strength of the north will not be compromised. Even the situation of the Northern War will change due to his actions in Hackland. Thinking about it, Hermione became increasingly proud of his choice. His choice was too correct, and Hackland was like a treasure trove. However, he was also well aware that in the land where violence was rampant in Hackland, it was impossible to do business well without strength. At that time, he will definitely face many difficult battles, whether it is the Cossacks or the Hacklanders. They will not settle down, but he has confidence to conquer all of them. If things are done well in Hackland, maybe he can really become a big shot capable of changing the north-south situation. Gradually, Hermione developed some ambition in her heart. The next day, Heme woke up very early, seemingly because the future was promising and he was very energetic. Early in the morning, he walked around the entire lawn, learning about the people living in this ruins, appearing in front of the people, letting them know who the owner was. Heme was just patrolling. He knew there were treasures under the ruins of Lam, but that was not something he could explore, and he didn't have the level to explore himself. Hermione's predecessor actually knew some magic and had studied at Ben Ard College before, but was dropped out due to his limited talent in magic. But he doesn't have enough to see that kind of thing. Looking for that kind of thing is just seeking death. It's better to let some demon hunter explore when the time comes. During such an inspection, Heme discovered some Asian merchants who were planning to travel to Hackland with the immigration team, carrying large and small packages. Heme was not surprised by the appearance of these people. He saw the trade with Hackland from the report, and it seems that they have noticed the sweetness in the trade with Hackland. These merchants are fully armed, and there is not a stable land over there, so moving forward on it also carries risks. Most people in Lam are satisfied with Heme. This lord is gentle and willing to understand the troubles of the residents. He even personally took people to solve a group of threatening demons near Lam. Everyone likes a lord who will protect them, and Herme's positivity undoubtedly adds a lot of points to him, even with those old subordinates. But Heme also faced increasing pressure as a result. So many people were waiting for his leadership, and his every move would determine their fate. Many times, Heme is pondering how to move forward in Hackland, what kind of attitude to adopt, and how to ensure the safety of the team. It was also on such days that the team was finally ready, with a total of over 1,000 people following Heme's command and embarking on the road to Hackland. Although there were already many preparations, Heme was still quite flustered along the way. After all, it was his first time managing so many people, and as the team moved, there were naturally more unexpected situations that occurred. Faced with so many unexpected events, he was naturally caught off guard, but gradually he adapted and began to become proficient. And there are also Jerry and Marlendo to help him, both of whom are good clerks, so there is no problem sharing the pressure for him. On the way to the mountains, Hermione felt a peeping gaze. He knew who this was, the free elves of the Blue Mountains. But these elves didn't do anything to the immigration team, they just watched them leave. After all, these free elves in the Blue Mountains tend to be more at odds with humans. Since Hermione didn't come to do anything to them, they wouldn't do anything either. Hermione would never touch the free elves, but he knew there were elves and powerful elf sorcerers in the Blue Mountains who had received the inheritance of knowledge from the White Boat. That was not something he could provoke. Soon, the team arrived at Este Hamlet, another ancient elf city, but the area was severely damaged and uninhabitable, so only a few dozen Ardian soldiers were stationed here. Arriving at Este Hamlet means it's not far from the Blue Mountain Tunnel, and Herme took a brief break here before heading there. When they saw the Blue Mountain Tunnel, everyone, including Heme, couldn't help but marvel at what they saw. Because what appeared in front of them was a passage that was enough for 3 carriages to pass side by side, with a height of 6 meters, a wide tunnel that could not even be seen in Mahakam. According to the research of the Scent scholars, they believe that it was dug up by the monster Sharma, which is very skilled at digging in the mountains. The scholars speculate that Sharma dug through the Blue Mountains in search of food, so the North and Hackland were able to be connected again. 100 years ago, there was a mountain path to Hackland in the Blue Mountains, which was said to have been left by elves. Many northern residents fled to Hackland through it, which was the source of those Cossacks. At that time, there was still trade between the two sides, and even nomadic tribes migrated to the north, some of which became military nobles in the north and have continued to this day. At that time, the mountain path collapsed due to long-term disrepair, and the sources on both sides were cut off. Now the tunnel is guarded by more than 100 soldiers from Aden, which is a crucial transportation artery. They have built many fortifications here, and it is estimated that this will become a gateway in the future. No matter what Sharma dug this passage for, it is not important to him. What is important to him now is that it is a grand road, representing the future and glory. So Heme was the first to decisively embark on the path of progress, heading towards the distant world. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Sazarburg. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Sazarburg. Contrary to expectations, the Blue Mountain Tunnel was not as dark as Heme had imagined. In fact, every 100 meters, torches embedded in the walls provided illumination, indicating the way forward. In the tunnel, Heme and his team also encountered patrol teams and tunnel strongholds, and it was they who were responsible for replacing and maintaining those torches. From these populations, he knew that it would take a day and a half to fully pass through this tunnel, which means he had to stay inside the tunnel for a day. Hermione thought to herself, this is not a big problem, it's just a day. Along the way, Herme's team did not encounter any problems. Although the tunnel was long, there were no chaotic branches. This open avenue has no monsters, no space for them to survive. The Sharma people were very focused on excavation and did not change direction, which led to such a situation, which is undoubtedly very beneficial for humans, and so on. Moreover, there is lighting everywhere, and the most concerning issue of rest has become the least important. Finally, Heme and his team arrived at the exit of the tunnel, where, like the entrance, there were also soldiers and levels under construction. The defense here is more complete, brick walls have been built, and there are horses and trenches outside the gate. The soldiers are still digging out rooms in the cave as their dormitories, it seems that they need to be stationed for a long time. The guard soldiers naturally knew the identity of Heme and others. After all, when such a large team arrived, everyone remembered the Baron mentioned in the report who came with immigrants. After a few pleasantries, they were allowed to pass through the entrance and enter this land. Then, as the Hermes walked out of the small forest where the entrance was located, the vast land of Hackland appeared before them. When they saw this land, everyone led by Heme instinctively held their breath. There is no other reason, the world in front of us is too vast. What appeared at the limit of their vision was a vast grassland, with no visible edges in the area they could see, as if connecting heaven and earth. And nearby, there are hills and forests, and villages are probably distributed within them. He knows that this is the land he rules over. As Maelna said, the scenery further east will be even more magnificent, because there is really an endless grassland. This made it difficult for Heme to imagine. The scenery before him was already unimaginable, and even further away, there was even a more magnificent existence. Heme will eventually go there to see him, but now, the important thing is to go to his Sazarburg, which is the center of his territory. So the northerners walked into this vast expanse of heaven and earth, into forests and hills, advancing in battle formation. This was what Heme had trained multiple times on the road, because heaven knows what they will encounter. The trees in this forest are not dense and appear sparse, but they are still enough for ambushes to lurk. Armed soldiers and men walked outside, with women and children carrying packages inside. Occasionally, several cavalry rode past, providing a sense of security for the people. Heme has always held a cautious attitude towards the surroundings. As mentioned in the report, this is a land full of good people. Although looking at this large team, most of the good citizens, of 3, 5, or even a dozen people dare not come to rob, God knows if there are any bold people. Hackland is an unstable land, and things like looting are all too common. During Hermione's time, she felt several voyeuristic glances, but they quickly disappeared. It seemed that those guys had ultimately decided to step down. And Heme quickly met the locals, who were the so-called Cossack villages, and they warmly welcomed Heme, the lord who was said to have come to rule. When they first met, the two sides almost got into a fight because the locals were armed and looked like a group of robbers from a distance. It was Marlendo who prevented the possible battle from happening. He stayed in Hackland for a long time and knew what the situation was in front of him. This village agreed to submit to the Kingdom of Eden. Or in their words, cooperate. The Cossacks did not resist the arrival of outsiders, as their ancestors had originally come from the west to this place. However, some of them have a lot of resistance to Heme's official identity, as there have never been people among them whose ancestors came to Hackland to escape power, and these things have been passed down as stories. But overall, the resistance is not high. After all, almost 100 years have passed since the arrival of the last wave of Western immigrants, and these are already outdated things from our ancestors. Through this opportunity, Heme was able to take a good look at the social ecology of these Cossacks. Indeed, every resident here is armed and always carries a machete. Many times, these Cossacks would have to go out and do business if they didn't agree, but they rarely hurt their lives, and they would stop at the point of bloodshed. The most important thing is that Heme observed that the Cossacks had a high level of organizational power. When they arranged the banquet, they started working step by step with just one order from the elders, without any hesitation. This high degree of obedience may have been developed in a long-term quasi-war state, and Heme thought that it seemed that Hackland society was even more cruel than he had anticipated. The Cossacks had a simple attitude towards the definition of Heme and their relationship. Heme provided shelter and cheap goods from the west, while they provided taxes and soldiers. The so-called taxation refers to the fur produced by the Cossacks, and as for the warriors, the Cossacks relied on force to establish themselves here. Regarding the value of Western goods here, Heme noticed one small thing, which is the iron pot of the locals. Although the Cossacks also knew how to forge iron, the iron pots they made always broke down quickly due to the materials and technology. However, even such iron pots can be sold at a high price among the nomads in Hackland. So if the handicrafts represented by iron pots in Yadian are sold here, the profit from them is really considerable. Therefore, Heme understood why those merchants laughed so happily, and the things they sold must have made them a lot of money. After bidding farewell to the Cossack villages, Heme continued towards Saza and encountered some Cossack villages on the way. Some of them were willing to receive Heme and his group, while others ignored them. This made Heme understand that the task on his land was still a long and arduous one, and that the Cossacks respected him only because he represented the kingdom. And those who disdain the kingdom greatly naturally disdain him even more. According to information obtained from local people, the Cossack villages here are still relatively weak, and even without any fighting gangs, they have not completely surrendered, let alone those Cossack fighting gangs. Heme not only encountered Cossacks on the road, but also Hacklanders. As a nomadic tribe, the Hackland people migrated everywhere, and due to the independence of the Cossack land, many failed Hackland tribes retreated to this area. The intensity of the war in the land of Cossacks is still relatively low compared to the grasslands, and Cossacks have a sense of propriety when plundering each other, so there won't be a big tragedy. Over time, they either returned to the grasslands to continue their warfare after recuperating, or grew tired of living in war and were assimilated by the locals, becoming members of the Cossack community. This is how many Cossack villages came about. These Hacklanders also have great respect for the owner of this land, but they clearly maintain a distance from Heme. After all, for them, the Baron of the Kingdom of Eden is still too far away. Heme doesn't ask for anything about this. It always takes time to make these people submit, and even for him now, not causing trouble is victory. After seeing these various people, Heme finally arrived at his fortress, Sazarburg. When he saw Sazarburg, Heme couldn't help but sigh. Sazarburg is located on a raised plateau, which is surrounded by sturdy wooden walls and looks very prominent. There is a river next to Sazarburg, named the Tsar River. There is a small port by the river with only a few small boats on it, probably owned by fishermen. Through the wooden wall, one can see a tall brick and tile main castle behind. The wooden walls and main castle are obviously in the style of dwarves, which means they can build such a sturdy building and complete such a large project within 6 months. This can also be seen from the pride on the faces of the dwarf craftsmen accompanying the army, which is clearly a work of their own clan. There are many farmlands surrounding this plateau that were developed by early immigrants, and now the crops are growing well. Looking at the scene, many farmers are very tempted. This is undoubtedly a land suitable for cultivation. If there is a river, the land is also suitable for development. There is also wood for building houses, and not far from Sazar Castle is a forest. The gate of Sazarburg opened in front of Heme and his group, and he was able to see the scene covered by wooden walls. Many houses had already been built on the terrace. Strangely, many houses look very new, as if no one has ever lived in them. Hermione did not immediately express his doubts because he knew that everyone in front of him would explain to him. The residents of Sazarburg are now standing in front of the gate, and Heme noticed that there are not only humans, but also some dwarves among them. Some Ardian people still maintain the typical attire of northern residents, but some decorations begin to resemble those of the local Cossacks. Dozens of dwarves stood in front, dressed as craftsmen, clearly holding a significant position in this settlement. "Salute to you, Baron Hermes." The leading dwarf took off his hat and bowed to Hermione. "I am Dunwa Born, the temporary manager of Sazarburg entrusted by the king. Currently, Sazarburg has 330 residents, including 22 dwarves, and 13 Cossack villages have expressed loyalty to Sazarburg. They will come to see you as soon as they receive news of your arrival." The dwarf speaks like a seasoned warehouse keeper, recounting everything he knows to Baron Sazarburg. "We learned a month ago that Baron you were about to lead a large number of immigrants, so we started building houses in Sazarburg. Currently, the houses in Sazarburg can accommodate 300 people, and there are still more houses waiting to be completed. By then, they can accommodate everyone. We hope you are satisfied. Thank you very much for your service. The kingdom will remember your service, Mr. Dunwa." Heme said, "Now let's settle the immigrants I brought, Mr. Dunwa. I'm afraid we'll have to trouble you." "Of course, this is my duty, Baron Heme." The dwarf bowed again, took over the new master's job, and then greeted the people under the organization of the soldiers, making them obey orders. Heme went to the main castle of Sazarburg to see his own residence. The first group of urban residents along the way were all watching Heme. After all, this was their lord. Heme held her head high and accepted their gaze, showing a posture that belonged to the lord. The closer Heme approached this sturdy building, the more he felt the power of dwarf technology, and it was not possible to build such a main fortress in other places in a short period of time. This main fortress is much more magnificent than the previous tower in Heme, and this is the true fortress. At this moment, Hermione heard his attendants and sergeant discussing behind him why the manager of this colony was a dwarf. The captain is not at all curious, he has come here several times. It is not surprising that the dwarves serve as the governors of human towns. Since the king helped Hackland avoid famine, there has been a rich friendship between the Kingdom of Eden and the dwarves. However, the relationship between the two sides is already close, and there is even the autonomous city of Phrygian, where many dwarves are employed by the Kingdom of Eden. Many workshops have dwarven craftsmen, so it's strange for a dwarf to serve as a governor in a colony. Heme entered the main castle, and the scene inside satisfied him. Everything in front of him was simple and sturdy, which was a typical dwarf style, just the kind he wanted. The lord's room is even more spacious, and the balcony outside just overlooks the entire Sazarburg. Heme stood on the balcony and saw that there were still many vacant spaces waiting to be built in Sazarburg, while at the city gate, Dunwall was distributing houses to the residents, and it could be said that there was a bustle of people there. This is something that immigrants did not expect. They thought they would have to live in the open air for a while after arriving, and then build the house. Now it seems that they should focus on cultivation. It's really a great place. Heme lifted her head and looked further into the magnificent scenery of the land of Hackland. This is a land that only needs to be developed, full of opportunities and risks, both of which coexist. This group settled down in the evening. That night, on the square in front of the main castle, Sazarburg held a grand banquet to welcome the arrival of immigrants. At the banquet, Hermione put on his most luxurious outfit, which was a black coat with his falcon emblem, and a golden necklace passed down from the family for generations hung around his neck. Ladies and gentlemen, we have arrived at a brand new land, a brand new world. We hope our future will be incredibly prosperous, our place of residence will be incredibly prosperous, and we hope that each and every one of us will be rich and satisfied. Heme held up her glass and said, "These words resonate with every immigrant who comes here, and everyone responds to Heme's words with cheers." This also marked the beginning of the banquet, as people poured delicious food into their mouths and drank glasses of beer without hesitation. Heme's eating style was naturally more respectable than that below. He enjoyed roasted sucking pig or roasted baby pig and lamb, and drank the precious and expensive Toussaint wine. However, more than food, he spent his time talking to Dunwall to understand how this dwarf resettled immigrants. Dunwall's approach is very clever. He directly asks everyone to draw lots, and if they draw short lots, they go to live in unfinished houses, which is the best way to block those gossiping. He also took care of the people brought by Heme from his hometown, specifically placing them all near the main castle. This naturally satisfied Heme very much. For him, the villagers were the ones he could trust the most. He must have thought of these people first. In addition, Heme was trying to learn about the Cossack villages he had defected to. To be honest, I rarely encounter humans that are so difficult to deal with. When he mentioned those Cossacks, he let out a sigh. Many times, they only want the goods of the kingdom for free. These guys' minds are full of all kinds of cunning ideas, and it's difficult to make them submit. These Cossacks have their stubborn pride, but at the same time, they are very flexible. For them, they can talk about anything and say anything. As a person who has been governing in Sazarburg for a while and has been dealing with Cossacks for a long time, Dunwall has too much trouble to deal with, and he has been greatly affected by these people. However, they do not discriminate against non-human races, and even dwarves and elves do not resist joining their team. I have actually seen such a situation there. It is probably influenced by the Hackland people. As long as you can show value, you can be respected, which is much better than the deep-rooted discrimination in northern countries. The dwarves were quite amazed when they mentioned this, as the discrimination against non-human races in northern society is deeply rooted, even in Eden, where they befriend the dwarves. You don't know, I've already been so fair, but someone is still saying bad things about me behind my back. That dwarf must have taken someone's money. TSK, that idiot still thinks I can't hear it. Really, it would be great if you humans were all like these Cossacks and Kazakhs. The dwarves are very honest, they rarely lie, which makes Hermione show some awkward expressions, and he can only say some seen words. Mr. Dunwa, neither the kingdom nor I will forget you. Ah, Baron, don't pay too much attention to a dwarf's complaint. Just treat it as a gust of wind, I understand. You should focus on enjoying your banquet. The dwarf spoke so directly, but Herm understood that he had no ill intentions. He picked up a glass of wine and drank it all in one gulp. This thing, TSK, is still not strong enough. I still hope to drink our Mahakam beer. Then I will try my best to find some for you, sir, and it will definitely satisfy you. Heme made a promise, his expression very serious. This dwarf is an important figure in the operation of Sazarburg, and he must win over this person. Thank you then. Dunwa obviously didn't take it seriously, he just smiled, that's all. He continued to look at the crowd in a frenzy, thinking about how much time he had to spend dealing with the mess afterwards. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Demon Hunting Commander. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Demon Hunting Commander. Joy is joy, work is work. After the feast, people also have to get busy and start a new life in Hackland. Especially for new immigrants, they don't have time to play and the land is still waiting to be developed. In the vicinity of the Tsar River, Western immigrants are busy developing these excellent irrigated lands. They use the tools provided by the commander to plow the soil and then sow seeds. Most immigrants come from their families, busy working together on the land allocated to them. The scenery by the river looks very lively, it's like a surge of people, and most of the population of Sazarburg is there. People work while singing songs. The northern countries have a common culture, after all, more than humans originated from those few ships, and many things are common. For example, the folk song they sing now is a song that has been passed down in various northern regions. There is a reason for everyone's busyness, and the Lord's subsidy is not eternal. If they cannot obtain some food from the land before the next harvest season, their days will be very difficult. Heme's food subsidies have decreased over time, which is also a common practice among northern countries when exploring wasteland. Everyone is aware that the newly cultivated land does not have much food, so subsidies will be provided to help farmers get through the most difficult period at the beginning. But in the early stages, subsidies will also decrease over time, until they disappear directly. That's also why the cost of development is high. If it weren't for the great strategy of the Kingdom of Eden in developing Hackland, Heme wouldn't have been able to obtain so many resources from the Demavid king. Yes, his expansion was a national plan, and the king naturally could think of anything that Heme could think of. The benefits involved in expanding Hackland were enormous. Heme is very certain that, according to normal circumstances, he is expected to stay here for 3 or 4 years, and once the environment is set up, the king will score points and appoint new nobles. The arrival of the new aristocracy was not only to promote the development of Hackland, but also to distribute power from him and prevent his family from becoming dominant. Although he holds the title of Commander of Hackland, this title is definitely not applicable to those newly appointed nobles. However, that is a normal situation. Heme is well aware that the Second Northern War will break out in 4 years, so he can monopolize Hackland's resources for a long time. If he can't come up with anything for such a long time, he doesn't need to think about the northern hegemony. He should be honest and live a lifetime in Hackland. Living a lifetime in Hackland is also good. This land is vast and beautiful, but until the last moment, Heme will not make this choice. When farmers are busy, merchants are also busy selling goods brought from the west in the market, which are very popular on the grasslands. Sazarburg has never lacked Cossacks and Hacklanders, who would purchase and transport these goods as soon as possible. This is also why the road to Hackland was discovered less than half a year ago, and merchants began to travel to this place. And from these merchants, Heme earned a good trade tax, but he felt that the number of merchants was still too small. Not to mention the entire Hackland market, they can't even meet the needs of their own territory. However, the most profitable one is still Heme. Compared to civilian merchants, he does not have much convenience in using his official identity to transport goods, and he also has the tax exemption of King Demavi. No matter how he tries, he can still make a big profit. Some of these products will be prioritized for sale to loyal Cossack villages, while the other part will be sold according to how they are sold. Sazarburg is not short of buyers. Dwarf craftsmen continued to build various buildings both inside and outside the city, making up the main force of the construction workers in Sazarburg. Some dwarves also engage in iron-making work, and the tools and weapons they produce can also be sold for a good price. The iron artifacts produced in the land of Hackland are relatively inferior. Traditionally, high-quality iron artifacts come from the southern kingdom of Saracania, which worships dragons. However, for places in the north, obtaining Saracanian weapons is very difficult. Now that the people of Eden come to import iron tools, they are naturally being crazily purchased by the locals. The only problem, however, is that Heme's main gain is not gold or silver. In most cases, the Kazakhs gave livestock, which is a common resource in the Kazakhs, while the Cossacks gave fur, which is a common resource among them. Heme had to transport all these things back to Eden before they could be exchanged for gold and silver. Fortunately, his official status allowed him to avoid heavy taxes. Otherwise, he would have to be like those merchants, carrying these goods back and being charged a heavy tax that accounts for 1/5 of the total value. It has to be said that King Demavi's vision is very sharp. He saw the huge price difference in the Hackland trade, so he naturally took this opportunity to obtain more resources. While embracing gold and silver through trade, Heme did not forget to strengthen her defenses. After all, robbery is always considered the first choice on the grassland. Previously, in order to engage in trade with Sazarburg, the powerful Ottomans in the vicinity also fought against each other to gain monopoly on trade with Sazarburg. Just because everyone has similar power, because no one has no way to reach anyone. And the idea of attacking Sazarburg is also because everyone is watching closely and no one dares to practice it. No one wants to be shot, and the continuous struggle on the grassland makes this kind of thing common. It also makes every grassland warlord have a strong vigilance towards their neighbors. But it's difficult for wolves not to eat meat, sooner or later someone will have to take action. Heme is also aware of this, but there is a saying that only a 1,000-day thief does not have a 1,000-day thief defense. Before those guys take action, all he can do is increase the border outpost. Fortunately, when the enemy attacks, he can convey the message to Sazarburg as soon as possible. So Heme would occasionally inspect the defense and material reserves of Sazarburg, supervise the training of his soldiers, and often gather the men of Sazarburg for militia training. In addition, he is also vigorously recruiting Cossacks and Hacklanders on the grasslands, where there are always armed wandering warriors who make a living by selling their weapons. He now needs to expand his military strength. But these warriors value reputation, and Heme can be said to be a typical unknown person on the grassland. There are no warriors who come to seek his help, but there are quite a few who come to eat and drink. But Heme still accepted them, no matter what he needs most now is manpower. These people have no regard for loyalty to the noble Heme, or in other words, the atmosphere on the grassland is like this. Loyalty to anyone is not loyalty, and there is no resistance at all. Of course, for Heme, the most important thing is to make more Cossack villages submit to the rule of Sazarburg and to strengthen the obedience of the submitting villages. This requires meeting with the leaders and elders of various villages. Previously, Taking advantage of these people coming to pay homage to his nominal lord, Heme had a good conversation with them. Then he understood why Dunwa found it troublesome to deal with this group of people. After smelling all his demands, these leaders and elders immediately began to sit on the ground and ask for prices, which made Heme extremely annoyed. If they want to give more, they need to give more resources, and the residents of Hackland are so realistic. However, they also stated that they will fight for Heme, which is already agreed upon. They will fulfill their obligations and bring male soldiers to help when they receive a call from Sazarburg. In this regard, the residents of Hackland are still very simple, at least better than those tricky people in the north, but it seems that this is also due to their better living environment. In this hilly and forested area, the Cossacks barely survived by farming and collecting, which is why their struggle remained at the bottom line. Because although the loser may fail, they can still barely survive, so don't cut the grass and eradicate the root. In the future, you may also encounter such a situation, and everyone should show mercy when the time comes. Therefore, they were able to spend more time honing their martial arts, which is the most important thing for survival in Hackland. Therefore, after all, he managed to obtain some things, such as getting these villages to agree to pay some food for Sazarburg, but the quantity was very poor, but it was always better than before. Regarding this situation, Heme is also very helpless. Ultimately, his current strength is weak and he has a great demand for local power, so he can only use this method to obtain loyalty. If it weren't for the huge profits that trade can bring, Heme wouldn't be able to sustain himself here for long. I don't seem to be a lord, but rather an affairs officer who doesn't have the courage to offend anyone. After another verbal altercation with a Cossack leader, like a village woman arguing with each other in the market, he let out the above mournful cries. The grassland values strength, Commander Heme. Only strength can earn you respect. Nowadays, the people on your territory only see you as a projection of the power of the Kingdom of Eden, and have no respect for you personally. It can be said that if you want to do something, you must first gain reputation on the grassland. Mirando said that now this young man who knows the Hackland grasslands has become his captain, handling various affairs around Heme. Regarding his reference to Heme as the commander, it is because Heme likes the false title of commander in Hackland. Compared to the title of baron, Heme prefers people to call him the commander, and the people below naturally favor the ruler and call him the commander. Fame, yes, reputation. Heme muttered the word, and the confusion and depression in his voice became less and less. He thought of something. How could he forget the theme of this world? I can't just stay in this main castle anymore, there are still tasks waiting for us outside. After finding the target, Heme immediately began his operation, sending messengers to various villages to understand if there were any monsters to deal with. Yes, monsters. The residents of this world have always been troubled by various monsters. After all, the novels that carry this worldview are called demon hunters. And there have always been many monsters on the Hackland grassland, and because there are very few demon hunters here, the task of killing monsters falls on the warriors. Hunting monsters is considered a glory by everyone, and there has never been a powerful Hackland ruler in history who has not hunted monsters. And in this investigation on the territory, it was found that there were indeed quite a few monsters, such as wherever there were evil spirits, where there were ghostly activities, and where there were Zizimo and Andrake raging. Even with the strength of the Cossacks, all they could do was stay away from the places where these monsters appeared. After all, the forest resources are abundant, and it's not enough to change places here. It's just a matter of walking more roads, so there's no need to lose manpower in the village. However, people must still be disgusted by the presence of monsters. Because some monsters will hide and actively hunt humans, and humans are also likely to walk to the monster's lair without knowing. And this is really hard to tell. At first glance, it startled me. To be honest, there are really many monsters on the territory. Since everyone knew where the monsters were, Heme began to slay and eliminate them. Starting from Sazarburg, he led his army to sweep and conquer the discovered monsters. Heme has organized a team of 40 people. The essence of Sazarburg is here, including several dwarves who participated in the general cleaning in Hackland. The so-called big cleaning refers to the Hackland dwarves continuing the melting of ice and snow, and the monsters' emergence to carry out a big cleaning on them. Therefore, the dwarves have extremely rich experience in dealing with monsters. Drawing on the experience of dwarves, Hermes and his team used flames, swords, and crossbows to fight against monsters. With good coordination, they were often able to easily eliminate monsters. After all, this is no longer the era when humans have just landed. Although the density of monsters in Hackland is even more exaggerated than in the north, the situation is just like that, unable to stop organized hunting teams. Every time they return to the city, Heme and his team bring back the bodies of monsters and show off their achievements to everyone. At first, not many people cared about their actions because at that time they only brought back weak monsters such as evil spirits, and they even suffered casualties as a result. At that time, Heme was mocked, the Grand Knight wore armor to kill those little evil spirits, but unfortunately, the car overturned and people died. But next, what Heme brought back were monsters like Anderleg and ghouls, and everyone's reviews also changed. Those Cossacks who disdained Heme's actions also took his actions seriously. As the indigenous people of this land, they were well aware of the dangers of these monsters. Gradually, the Cossacks began to join his team, hunting monsters together, and the number of Hermes' hunting team unknowingly doubled, becoming a large team of over 100 people. In battle, Heme always stood at the front line to command and even personally participated in the battle, which left a deep impression on the Cossacks. As these impressions spread, the attitude of Cossacks towards Heme also quietly changed. With a team of these 100 people, Heme can also solve many nests and monsters that Cossack villages alone cannot solve or are unwilling to pay the price for, and eradicate the long-standing problems that have plagued people. Therefore, he gained people's gratitude and love, and gradually, Hemet's hunting team was welcomed by the village every time they went. He also demonstrated the effect of doing so, gradually attracting new Cossack villages to seek refuge under the jurisdiction of Sazarburg. Heme's reputation rose in his territory, and people no longer saw him as an agent of the Kingdom of Eden, but as a brave and fearless warrior. Hero, this is the term used by Cossack society to refer to the brave. Cossack hero songs tell their stories, and Heme has become a member of the transmission of hero songs. In order to gain such a reputation, he has put in a lot of effort. Rumors of monsters are not always reliable, and often Heme and his team have to run away empty-handed. But the commander is not angry either. For him, this is also an opportunity to understand his own territory, and running empty is also worth it. Heme has indeed gained a lot from running around during this period, which has benefited him a lot. Not only fame, but also understanding the terrain of the territory and seeing the population and wealth level of each village. The most important thing is that people are still more willing to obey rulers who often appear in front of them, rather than distant masters, which is particularly evident in Cossack society. Heme is now swaying in front of them, solving their problems, and they will naturally support Heme. In the eyes of many people, Heme is already their ataman. Sazarburg did not encounter any problems due to his wandering around. The city's government affairs are already limited, and he can usually solve them. As for those troublesome trivial matters, Dwarf Dunva and Captain Jerry have solved them. The residents of Sazarburg are also proud to see the monster corpses brought back by their leader. Their ruler is a skilled warrior, and only such people can lead them to survive here. Living here, immigrants also understand that this is not a land for easy living, so their dependence on Heme has become stronger, and they also attach great importance to the training of martial arts. Moreover, the reduction of monsters also benefits them. Every northern resident understands the importance of eliminating monsters. The fewer monsters there are, the safer the settlement will be. Every boy in Sazarburg now yearns to join Home's hunting team, and in their eyes, this is the hero they want to become in the future. But they only saw the glorious returning hunters, they wouldn't see the casualties of the hunting team, and even if they did, they thought they couldn't be the deceased, but as for the children, that's it. As for the monster corpses brought back, Heme sold them to merchants in exchange for the coins she urgently needed. Heme's demand for coins is still very high, mainly because he needs money to recruit immigrants in Aden. Although the king promised to send people, he cannot hang himself with just this rope. Merchants are also willing to purchase these monster corpses, alchemists and sorcerers are willing to bid for these monsters, so they don't worry about the market at all. Even under the reputation of the Hackland monster, these can be sold for even higher prices. As Heme's monsters hunted, he unknowingly cleared the obvious monster nests on his territory, and the remaining monsters were mostly in difficult-to-reach places. Hermione doesn't plan to go to those places either. Monsters are easy to find because they are close to human settlements, and not easy to find means they are far away from human settlements. Monsters far away from settlements won't harm humans much, so why did he pursue and kill those guys? Heme was planning to send someone to find a demon hunter and sign a long-term contract with him to deal with the monsters on his territory. Solving monsters is ultimately something that professionals are good at. Now that they have obtained what they want through demon hunting, if they want to go further, they need to find big monsters, but that's not easy to find. So it's better to entrust these tasks to professionals, even if you pay for them yourself, you can still earn a reputation. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Master Craftsman. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Master Craftsman. Seeing the new caravan from afar, Dwarf Dunwa stood up, stretched his body, and then shouted loudly in Dwarf's loud voice, "Brothers! We're all ready to start work. There seem to be a lot of merchants today, but they're already busy. Hey, don't sleep, get up quickly." Kicking the dwarf's staff around him, he woke them up and called them to work, and then Dunwa walked to the door. The others were already waiting. Captain Jerry greeted him kindly, and Dunwa naturally responded with a friendly attitude. As a dwarf who has lived in human society for a long time, Dunwa can easily see who is fundamentally discriminatory and who is truly friendly, and this undoubtedly belongs to the latter. So Dunwa and he have a good relationship, and they often go drinking together after work. Would you like to have another drink after finishing work later? Dunwa thought to himself that the commander had actually brought him a batch of Mahakam beer, which undoubtedly caught his attention. And there is also the kind of strong liquor from the locals, which is also good. No, it's not time to finish work yet. Dunwa shook his head, which made Jerry look a bit strange. Why is his old friend doing this? What's going on? But then Jerry heard someone mutter, "What is the dwarf tree stump doing?" So he immediately stared over, and the person who made the sound immediately stopped speaking. That person is a porter in the market, waiting for business here. This group of people is the least fond of dwarves, as they have taken away many of their jobs. Although the relationship between the Kingdom of Eden and the dwarves has always been friendly, there are still some people in Sazarburg who discriminate against non-human races. However, there is no such person among the soldiers from the Army of Eden. The number of dwarves in the Army of Eden can be said to be the highest among the northern countries, with many wearing armor and weapons made by dwarves. In such a situation, discrimination against dwarves is undoubtedly eliminated in the military. After all, the majority of ordinary soldiers and sergeants use their own things. In this situation, even if you play discrimination, you are not afraid of being damaged by the equipment people give you. If he does, you will be ruined on the battlefield. Another group here that does not discriminate against dwarves at all is the Hackland residents. Whether they are Cossacks or nomads, they only value strength rather than race. In the history of this place, there have even been several elf Adamans. Although they are relatively distant events, it is enough to show the characteristic that anyone with the ability can make a fortune here. That's also why the dwarves love this place so much. Everyone always likes to live in an environment without discrimination. Moreover, the northern immigrants who come here are gradually reducing discrimination against non-human races under the influence of local customs. Continuing with the matter of the Sazarburg gate, the caravan quickly arrived in front of everyone. The leading merchant warmly embraced Jerry, shook hands with Donwa, and smoothly stuffed a small bag of coins into their arms. Both of them silently accepted it, and some things, no matter where they are customary. The carriage of this caravan bears marks of swords and knives, which is not surprising to everyone. It's strange that there were no elderly people robbing along the way. But fortunately, after the initial discomfort, everyone knows how to deal with it. Gather more people and symbolically throw away some products, and generally there is no problem. He knew it was not good for trade, but he needed the power of those villages. Those people were also very cunning and wouldn't steal the official, his, caravan. It was difficult for these people to find which village it belonged to, so they turned a blind eye. Of course, when his strength increases, he will definitely have to deal with this issue. The safer the trade routes, the more prosperous the trade. After confirming that all the documents were correct, the caravan, with the help of porters, transported the goods to the market where many local merchants were waiting. The end point of merchants from the west is here, and they will not continue to move forward because none of them have successfully returned. Crossing the Zar River is seen by everyone as an incredibly foolish thing. The leader has only been here for 4 months, and this land has become increasingly prosperous. I really didn't expect it. Watching the conversation between the merchants of Eden, Cossacks, and Hackland, Dunwa couldn't help but sigh. He originally thought that young people who knew where they came from would have to spend at least a year figuring out the rules of Hackland's operations and another year figuring out how to act. As a result, Heme had only been here for a month and he had basically figured things out. At first, Dunwa thought he would have to come out and clean up the mess in the end, but now it seems that he is completely worried. His thoughts at that time even seem a bit funny now. Now the title of Baron Saza in Heme can be said to be true, and the Cossack villages west of the Zar River have shown some loyalty to this baron, beginning to provide him with taxes and soldiers. Since the leader killed the demon, almost every village has surrendered to him. To be honest, anyone who sees the demon's head will not doubt the leader's strength. Jerry spoke as he looked at the specimen on the gate tower, which was the head of a staghorn demon with a clear scar on it. This kind of monster belongs to the relatively powerful one, and can even use magic to make people temporarily blind. Local people are very afraid of it. Dunwa clearly knew something. Listening to this statement, his eyes rolled, but he didn't say anything. Let's continue working, Jerry. When it's all over, let's go have a drink. Okay, let's go to the old place. When the entrance of Sazarburg was busy, in the main castle, Heme was receiving a guest he had invited. Thank you very much, Master George. This is your reward. Heme handed a bag filled with coins to the demon hunter in front of her, her words filled with gratitude. Compared to 4 months ago, Hermione's attire has undergone significant changes. Now he is wearing a fur coat from a wealthy Cossack, with an expensive flipped leather hat, a blue cloak behind him, and a round staff in his hand. However, the decorations and clothing styles still belong to the north, and you can still see at a glance that he comes from the north. If we disregard this point, it would be like a wealthy Ottoman. This change is closely related to the population changes in Sazarburg, as more and more Cossacks and nomads from Hackland come to do business in Sazarburg and Heme's authority in its territory stabilizes, resulting in an increasing number of local residents in the city. The residents on the grassland are all pragmatists who use whatever is useful, so after discovering the convenience and protection of Sazarburg, immigration increased, and even the entire village was relocated. He naturally accepted this. He needed his urban population to increase, and the people who came to seek refuge were scattered. Even if the village was relocated, it was a small village that could be easily dispersed without any worries. Faced with the increasing number of local people under his command, what Heme can do is gradually localize. Regarding assimilation, this has already emerged among those northern immigrants who are beginning to be attracted by the local style and are gradually changing into more suitable attire for this land. And Cossacks were also influenced by Northerners, and some of their attire was also Northern. Both sides also began intermarriage, and among the several batches of refugees sent by King Demavi later, there were many women who happened to come to seek refuge in Heme. They were all bachelors, and by the way, the marriage issue was resolved. Moreover, among the population he ruled, there were still relatively many Cossacks, and this attire made the Cossacks clearly aware of his identity as a ruler. It is precisely because of your efforts that my people are able to avoid the attacks of those dangerous monsters. It's all my responsibility, Commander. The demon hunter humbly said, paying a very respectful tribute. Interestingly, this demon hunter is not like a mutant who always looks disheveled, but rather like a knight. His monster hunter equipment is like a set of knight armor, but it does not affect his agility, and the griffin emblem on his breastplate indicates his school of thought. The person in front of me is George, a demon hunter from the Griffin faction, who was specially invited by the immigration team of Heme Rang to hunt demons. This master took on the task of clearing out those difficult-to-find monsters, and the professional was indeed different. He found monsters in many places that Heme and others seemed unlikely to have monsters. Master George's greatest achievement was the hunting of demons. At that time, it was actually the master who discovered this hidden monster ready for a surprise attack, and then a fierce battle broke out between them. In the chaotic battle, the master seriously injured this monster, but he himself couldn't fight it anymore. Finally, Heme took this opportunity to solve the deer-headed demon and become a demon slayer, allowing his reputation to finally intimidate the entire territory and make everyone submit. Of course, Heme never concealed himself in this matter as just a leak collector, but others, intentionally or unintentionally, ignored the existence of Master George. This made Heme feel very embarrassed for a while, thinking that he had stolen the glory of the master, but the master said he didn't care at all and that solving that monster was enough for him. The demon hunters of the Griffin school are like this, they are more like knights. This school inherits the ideas of the original demon hunter cult and the father of the demon hunters, Arzu. For them, it is more important to relieve disasters for the people. Afterwards, the relationship between Hermione and Master George became better and better, and they always chatted to pass the time after completing their work. Hermione occasionally asked George about the story of the transformation of the demon hunters. After all, they were the protagonists of this world, and he couldn't be uninterested. George didn't hide anything. During this time, he learned that Hermione was a good person, a person worthy of sincere treatment. Therefore, Hermione learned many details about the transformation of the demon hunters. George omitted a lot of details about the recipe, but the details he revealed left Herm speechless. The high failure rate of the transformation and the pain experienced by the transformation experience made him feel unbearable. Therefore, he cut off all thoughts about the demon hunters, which were too costly and risky to consider. He also asked Master George if he knew about Geralt, the protagonist of the Demon Hunter and Wizard series. George said he had heard of this person a long time ago. He is a star of the Demon Hunters and was famous for his entanglement with female sorcerers before he became famous for his story with Shirley. Their division, and cooperation have always been a topic of discussion. Hermione listened to Master George telling the story of Geralt, which felt quite subtle. Geralt was also a well-known character to him. Now, listening to a Griffin demon hunter telling the story of Geralt, how could there be a sense of fantasy? Master George is now famous in Baron Sazar's estate, and this demon hunter is undoubtedly a powerful hero in the eyes of the Hacklanders, receiving praise everywhere. The Cossacks ultimately came from the north, and there has always been a memory of seeking out demon hunters when in trouble. In their legend, demon hunters are heroes who slay demons and eliminate them. The formation of this concept was later studied by scholars, who believed that it was a manifestation of nostalgia for the past among immigrants who crossed the Blue Mountains and lost the help of demon hunters, having to face monsters on their own. This became a collective memory. So the Cossacks did not have the kind of discrimination that Northerners had against mutants, which led to the current situation. This is a rare situation in the north, and even the most famous Griffin faction finds it difficult to gain such widespread popularity in the north. Master George also made enough money here, but the Cossack villages often gave him livestock and fur, which made him have to go to exchange money every time. He was also tricked by merchants several times because he didn't know how to exchange, and in the end, Heme came forward to solve the problem. "Master George, are you planning to leave?" After receiving the money, George did not leave, but instead drank with Hermione on the balcony every day. "Yeah, I've heard about the same here. Winter is coming and it's time to go back to our old fortress. The elders of the school are still waiting." George finished the drink in one gulp and talked about his next plans. "But don't worry, I will come the next spring and bring a few colleagues with me. We have rarely found such a good place to make money and be friendly in recent years. Hackland is indeed a place suitable for demon hunters. There is no demon hunter activity here, and monsters are everywhere. My territory is just a small part of Hackland, and there are places where you can work." Heme agrees that Hackland is simply a paradise for demon hunters, with job opportunities everywhere, and people respect those who are capable, even treating them as heroes. "Alright, Master, let's go take a stroll in the market. You're about to leave, so let me give you a gift." Hermione made an invitation, and Master George was also his friend. How could he not give some gifts when his friend left, and Master had no objections? Accepting gifts was normal. Quickly, the two walked out of the main castle under the salute of the guards. What appeared in front of them was the square in Sazarburg, which was also the location of the market. The square is filled with various vendors, including Eden merchants and Hackland merchants. Citizens and outsiders walked together on the crowded streets, choosing goods. Hermione walked directly into the market with George, and the guards quickly cleared a path for the commander. Soon, the commander arrived at his destination. That was a Hackland blacksmith's shop, filled with various weapons and equipment with a strong Hackland style. Heme walked in with George. "Hey, Savon, it's me. Is what I need ready?" "Of course, Commander, I'll bring it to you right away." The vendor is an old Hackland man, with his upper body wrapped only in a leather apron, and his arms show his strength. Although Hackland is always filled with garbage and goods. Hermione explained to George, but there are still good blacksmiths. The weapons in this place are bubbling well and extremely bad. As soon as he finished speaking, the blacksmith brought what the commander wanted. To be precise, he pushed it out because it was a set of grassland armor worn on a dummy. The main body of this armor set is armor, with many plate armor pieces attached. The helmet also wears a set of face armor, with an iron face without any expression, which is a style favored by the Hackland people. Armor is obviously specially designed and more flexible than regular armor. When George saw this armor, his eyes clearly lit up. He touched the armor and then felt its weight. He tried again, and his eyes became even brighter. The weight loss is simply the best, and this nail plate is not ordinary, it seems to be made of various alloys. George exclaimed, "I've never seen such good armor before. I guess only the armor of the dwarf master can compare to it. Dwarves' armor has their advantages, which our armor cannot match." The blacksmith spoke, his voice deep and generous, admitting his shortcomings, "But we also have our strengths, Master Demon Hunter. You won't regret owning this armor." "Indeed, Master, you are truly humble," George said respectfully, as he could tell from this suit of armor that the blacksmith in front of him was undoubtedly a blacksmith capable of crafting a demon hunter master's suit. This is urgently needed for demon hunters, as their master set can only be crafted by blacksmiths at this level. If we provide you with a blueprint, can you craft equipment? George took the opportunity to say what immediately came to his mind, which was the master's suit. "I haven't made it before, but my master once made a master craftsman set for a scorpion-tailed lion, flying lion, school demon hunter. He comes from the southern country that worships dragons, and I have also studied it. So, Master Demon Hunter, if you can take it out, I can make it." The blacksmith named Savon proudly said, this is a manifestation of his confidence in his skills. Master George, are you satisfied with this armor? Hermione finally spoke up, you can either save it or sell it for money. Of course, Commander, I will definitely collect it well. George's tone was touched, he didn't expect him to provide such a set of equipment, and he thoughtfully expressed that he could even sell it directly. And even more precious is that Heme provided a master who could create master crafting sets, which is important for demon hunters. The two quickly bid farewell to each other. The demon hunters needed to prepare for their departure, while Hermione had to go back to deal with political affairs. On the way back, Heme was very busy and satisfied with his approach. He gave George the armor not only for friendship, but also to let the demon hunters know that there was a master blacksmith they had been looking for here. For a long time, demon hunters have had a strong pursuit of master craftsman sets, and it seems that Tau Sente has produced a blacksmith master, so many demon hunters have come to visit. And as for how this blacksmith master came to Sazarburg, Heme felt lucky when he thought about it. This master came here because he heard that Sazarburg had a new technology he had never seen before. After discovering that there was indeed something he needed in the local area, he settled down and established this blacksmith's shop, working on iron and researching technology. Hermione's territory requires demon hunters, and the number of monsters in Hackland is simply endless. Hermione cannot always be on the front line of demon hunting. So he needs demon hunters to sweep away the monsters in this land, provide assistance for human development, and make his territory more prosperous. Just as Herm was pondering how to make his territory more prosperous, a threat he had already forgotten had arrived, and he had been waiting for it for a long time. End of this chapter.